The late Southern and Northern Dynasties and the post-Three Kingdoms period. Liuhun dominates Hebei, Yuwen Tai dominates Guanxi, and Bodhisattva Xiao cultivates Buddhism in Jiangdong. Xiao Xiong's spirit is uplifted, and the people are in tears and blood. The smoke of Mount Mang rises again, and the dry bones of the river bridge pile up. In times of great turmoil, division will inevitably lead to unity. Crossing the Taihang Mountains, crossing the Yangtze River, unifying the Six in One, and rebuilding the imperial industry. Keywords of the novel. No pop-up window for Northern Dynasty's Imperial Business. Download the complete collection of Northern Dynasty's Imperial Business TXT, and read the latest chapters of Northern Dynasty's Imperial Business. Chapter 1. Remaining Soul of Mangshan Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Remaining Soul of Mangshan Mountain. The moon is dark and the wind is high, the flames are flickering, and the noisy waves of many horses and people howling directly enter the ears, causing pain in the eardrums. The thief's cavalry is approaching. Hurry up, hurry up. On the dusty road, there were scattered defeated soldiers with disorderly military robes, waving their swords, spears, and staff in anger as they walked slowly ahead, roaring and intimidating. More of the defeated soldiers simply left the main road of the army and fled desperately into the wilderness. These defeated soldiers did not know how long they had fled, some died directly on the way, and few stopped to pay attention to rescue. At most, they grabbed the weapons and staff left by the other party and hurriedly fled to the west. In this scene of hasty fleeing, there were so many dozen or so people who stopped in the wilderness without moving, appearing out of place. Although there was no sign of defeat from the surrounding soldiers fleeing, there was still more sorrow in the expressions of these dozen or so people. Although the Western army has been defeated, there is always a place to return. Where is our place of return? A strong soldier sighed with a cane, and several people around him also had dim and confused eyes. Don't look disheartened, protect Arang. A middle-aged bearded man said in a deep voice, while looking towards the center where they stood. Among these dozen or so people stood a skinny donkey, with a young-looking injured man lying on its back. His forehead was wrapped in a green scarf, and his tall hands and feet were powerless to hang on either side. He needed support from someone on both sides to lie down firmly on the donkey's back. I don't know about Arang's injury. Alas, the Western army's bow-e. Although we are new allies, we always fight side by side with them in a few battles. Yukefu praised Arang's bravery, but turned around and abandoned us in Hengnong. Fortunately, the Wang envoy who took over the city affairs remembered his past righteousness and was willing to let us out of the city. However, the current war is chaotic, and both the Gao envoy and the Lang leader are unaware of their whereabouts. Arang is seriously injured and falls asleep. A person with a melancholic tone was complaining, while the one guarding the donkey to support the sleeping boy was pleasantly surprised and said, Arang moved. Arang, did you wake up? Yes, I'm awake. Where is this? And you? The young man on the donkey's back looked up with some difficulty, but his eyes were still dazed, confused and surprised. Arang finally woke up. This is the northern suburbs outside the city of Hengnongkang. The day before yesterday, Arang, you were attacked by the Eastern Army's staff and fainted. The Western Army at the foot of Mangshan was defeated, and we could only retreat to Hengnom with the Keifu troops. At dawn, the Western Army left again, but we were left behind in Hengnom. Fortunately, the defending General Wang Xizheng was not a Jinhu, and even after knowing Xiao Alang's background, he did not recruit us. He gave us a donkey as a gift and we escorted Arang out of the city. The middle-aged bearded man rushed forward to speak in a sickly voice, while the young man held his head in both hands and groaned in pain. The head hurt so much. What's going on? No wonder he had a headache and confusion. He stayed up late and then went to bed, but after being awakened, he found himself in such a noisy and unfamiliar environment, which was difficult to accept. A dozen or so people around approached with concern, but the young man looked wary and raised his hand to push and block, saying, You don't come over. What's wrong with Arang? Everyone was both worried and skeptical when they saw the situation. The middle-aged bearded man raised his hand to signal everyone to step back a bit, and then slowed down his tone and said softly, Don't be afraid, Arang. Zhu Xing is here, and the group of disciples are here. We must guard Arang's safety. You are Uncle Zhu Xing. Go to Ji, Yen Tu, and Xiao Xiong. A few unfamiliar names blurted out, and the young man was momentarily stunned. After a moment, a surging memory and emotion that did not belong to him emerged from his mind, causing him to feel a headache and nauseous when he bent down. Everyone felt even more panicked when they saw the situation, but before they could ask a question, the boy's vomiting gradually stopped and his movements were no longer frivolous, but he looked up at the dark sky. Unfortunately, there was only chaos and chaos on this night, with no shining stars and moons. Otherwise, one could sing a sentence. Today we do not see the ancient moon, but today the moon once shone upon the ancient people. Western Army, Eastern Army, Mangshan Mountain, Hungnong, Yukefu, Wangshijun. Even if you haven't fully digested the diverse information in your mind yet, relying solely on these key words can still organize some key clues. He lived in a time and space during the late period of the Southern and Northern Dynasties. In the first year of the Wuding reign of the Eastern Wei Dynasty and the 9th year of the Datong reign of the Western Wei Dynasty, the two northern hegemons, Yuwen Tai of the Western Wei Dynasty and Gao Huan of the Eastern Wei Dynasty, fought over the Heluo region in the Battle of Mangshan, which resulted in a great defeat for the Western Wei Dynasty. The identity and situation of the youth were also closely related to this great battle. The young man's name is Li Tai, with the courtesy name Boshan and the courtesy name Aban. He is a descendant of the Li family in Longxi and, along with his father Li Xiao, is a subordinate staff of Gao Zhongmi, the governor of Yuzhou in the Northern Wei Dynasty. And this battle of Mangshan was caused by Gao Zhongmi's betrayal of Eastern Wei and surrender to Western Wei. The young man was still sorting out more clues in his mind, but not far away, a group of armed soldiers walked towards them, shouting in front of them, Where do you belong to? Why are you standing still? His thoughts were interrupted by the cheers, and although Li Tai had not fully digested his new identity and situation, he only subconsciously said to the people around him under nervousness, Get on the road first, talk while walking. The young master woke up, although he seemed a bit confused, everyone finally had a backbone. After hearing this, they also rode around a thin donkey and headed west together. There was no response to the shouting and questioning of the Western Army leader. The main force was newly defeated, and it was important for each to escape. The military order was no longer in place, and no one had to fear anyone. The donkey's back was very thin and weak. Although it was covered with a layer of hemp felt, it still hurt its buttocks. After taking a few steps, Li Tai decided to turn over and walk. He was still a bit out of state, and his down-to-earth mind was a bit more stable. Seeing his companion struggling to carry packages, he raised his hand and said, Put your luggage on the donkey's back and carry it, save some effort. Ulung's armor was collected here, but his spear was conspicuous and left behind in Hungnong. Upon hearing his companion's words, Li Taikai remembered more identity-related situations. He came from a wealthy family and was considered a descendant of a noble family in this era. He originally lived with his parents in Qinghe County, Hebei Province. But the original owner was not a weak scholar who specialized in scriptures. Since childhood, he had a strong hero complex and admired Gao Outsao, a representative of the Han people in Hebei. He did not love academic studies and martial arts, so he also possessed a body of bow, horse, and combat skills that could be considered skilled, although not very clever. A few months ago, Gao Zhongmi, the elder brother of Gao Outsao, visited the village and recruited his father Li Xiao as a staff member. The original owner was hunting in the village at the time, and only found out after returning home that his father had left the village with Gao Zhongmi for his post. So he chased after him with several family soldiers, not only feeling uneasy, but also unwilling to be lonely in the countryside. After the meeting, the original owner was scolded by his father, accusing him of being reckless and unaware of the danger, but he had already arrived and could only take his companions to Hunan to take office. After entering the Tiger prison in northern Yuzhou, Gao Zhongmi revealed his intention to defect to the Western Wei. The reaction of the original owner's father is not very clear in memory, but the original owner is very excited, partly due to the fearlessness of the young man's greed for power, and partly due to dissatisfaction with the Eastern Wei court. The death of the special young idol Gao Outsao made the original owner full of disgust towards the Gao family, who held power in the Eastern Wei dynasty. Although Gao Outsao died on the battlefield during the war with the Western Wei dynasty, from the perspective of the simple values of youth, it is understandable for the two countries to die on the battlefield during the war either due to adverse timing or weak willpower. However, Gao Outsao's death was due to being cut off by Gao Huan's nephew, which is why he deeply hates the Gao family. Gao Situ is the backbone of my Han son in Hebei province. After breaking this, there is no one who dares to open his eyes for a single penny of Han. The hatred of losing his backbone is not enough to justify the responsibility of being a fake child's flesh and skin. When I am 7 feet strong, I will surely kill Yongla. The news of Gao Outsao's death spread to the village, and the original owner also summoned his fellow villagers to set up an altar for him to summon souls as a sacrifice, cry loudly, and make a vow. Unfortunately, 2 years ago when his height had just grown to 6 feet, Gao Yongla, the nephew of Gao Huan who refused to accept Gao Outsao in the closed city, died. So when the Western Wei army arrived, the original owner did not hesitate to fight due to his youth. He actively fought for and led a team of family soldiers to follow the opening of the Western Wei government, and gradually removed some powerful fortress walls between he and Luo that still followed the orders of the Eastern Wei. Afterwards, the army of the Eastern Wei crossed the river and killed, while the Western army was at a disadvantage in the battle. Yu Jinji's army was unable to converge with the Chinese army in time and was also scattered and washed away. Yu Jinji collected a portion of the defeated army to avoid the frontal battlefield and disguised the surrendered army, including the original owner and his companions. When the Eastern Wei army rushed past, they attacked the rear of the Eastern army again. Taking advantage of the chaos at the beginning and end of the Eastern army, they finally broke out of the main battlefield of Mangshan. And the original owner was also injured on the battlefield, and his memory came to an abrupt end. When he woke up again, he was already the current Li Tai. The situation is not good. As Li Tai walked, he pondered inwardly, setting aside the lingering emotions of the young couple in the original owner's mind, and carefully analyzing the current situation and his own situation. His predecessor was an ancient lifestyle host who also worked on popularizing ancient history. He had an understanding of the process of love and killing between the Eastern and Western Wei dynasties, which had the most CP feeling in history. The Battle of Mangshan was the fourth major battle between the Eastern and Western Wei dynasties surrounding northern hegemony. The Western Wei dynasty suffered a disastrous defeat this time, which can be said to have wiped out the dividends of previous wars and years of accumulation. Although the northern Zhou and Sui dynasties, with Western Wei as their source, ultimately unified the north and the world, that is still a later story. His current situation is that he has not completely escaped from the He Luo battlefield of the Western Wei dynasty's great defeat. The growling in his stomach interrupted Li Tai's thoughts. He was injured and unconscious, and now he has hardly eaten, feeling hungry and unbearable. Does Arang want food? A middle-aged man named Zhu Xing approached and asked, pointing to the package on the donkey's back and whispered, "There is still some food here, but we need to go to a secret place to cook." Surrounded by roads and wilderness, scattered with fleeing soldiers, it is naturally not suitable to start a fire and cook. No need, it's important to hurry. Others were just rebels, while his own group were iron and porcelain traders from the Eastern dynasty. It is imaginable that Li Tai did not want to lose his life due to his desire to eat. He even dismissed the idea of returning to Hennong City and watching Wang Xizheng's empty city plan to retreat from the enemy. The group fled westward, 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow. From night to day, they could still feel a bit tired, but in the end, they only gritted their teeth numbly and rushed on. So we walked until morning, and on the road ahead appeared a relatively open earthen plateau. A wooden fence blocked the way to climb the plateau. Outside the wooden fence, several Western Army soldiers and knights held various patterned flags and marched on horses, shouting constantly, "Where do the group of disciples belong? Everyone should recognize the flag, and scattered soldiers cannot climb the plateau." Some soldiers shouted and refused to obey, but when they were about to shoot from behind the wooden fence, they could only obediently bow their heads and follow behind a flag recognition. Which department should we belong to? Should we just agree and get by first? At this moment, Li Tai's mouth is dry and his head is swollen and painful, and he urgently needs to rest. After seeing this, he said, "No way, if you belong to the recognition of the flag or surrender to the military, it will be difficult to escape. I will go forward and call for help first." Middle-aged man Zhu Xing waved his hand and said, then walked forward with a sword and shouted to a Western military knight holding a flag, "We, the envoy of Dongzhou Gi Gao, have followed the troops of Keifu to charge forward. We earnestly request your permission." "General Gao. You're talking about the eastern thief Gao Zhongmi. He was arrested by the left army's Zhao Piaoqi camp for concealing the eastern thief's military plan and causing the army to be defeated. Are you his soldiers? I see you're spies of the eastern thief, take them." Hello everyone, hello again. A new story, a new beginning. During the new book period, there will be 2 shifts every day, at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. New book seedlings, urgently needed care, hope to collect in support. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Prisoners under Tongguan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Prisoners under Tongguan. Surprisingly, there were already spies from the east in Tongguan Dongyuan, which immediately made the atmosphere inside and outside the city tense again. Many Western soldiers who had already been pacified left the camp to look and inquire. Li Tai and his group of more than 30 people, dressed in disheveled clothes and with bruised noses and swollen faces, were taken to the Yuwen by more than 200 Western Army soldiers. The reason why the team size has more than doubled is that when they were just in the lower part of the plateau, more than a dozen people happened to stand too close to them and were also arrested as accomplices. Of course, it was also because at a critical moment, Li Tai shouted loudly, "The power of living is great, beheading is not enough to divide the power." His original intention was to avoid being indiscriminately stabbed and killed on the spot, and this shout also aroused the idea of the defeated soldiers of the Western Army around him to make up for their mistakes, causing the scene to be extremely chaotic. Although they became prisoners in the blink of an eye, they managed to save their lives. A knight wielded a spear and waved the shiny fine armor he had just captured on the donkey's back, pointing to Li Tai and the detention team and laughing, "This young general from the eastern thief has such exquisite armor. His official rank must be high." The onlookers on the plateau were both envious and panicked, and they saw the situation. The Western dynasty has always been poor and weak, and even high-ranking generals in the military are often covered in old armor. As a result, many generals were missed as soldiers on the battlefield and saved their lives. Therefore, in military achievements, there is also a content of seizing armor, staff, and weapons. If the quality is high enough, the reward is far greater than the skill of beheading. Fine armor is a type of full-body armor that lies between scaly armor and pierced armor. Compared to scaly armor, it is easier to maintain and more aesthetically pleasing in form. Originally made by the southern Lu Song Su Wei, it had strong protection and was lightweight and beautiful. Later, many mid-level generals of the Luoyang Imperial Guard in the Northern Dynasty also wore this armor. The thin armor in front of me is well designed and maintains an excellent metallic luster. In the eyes of these Western soldiers, it is considered the finest armor. Capturing such a fine armor alone would be enough to exchange for 10 prisoners of war, such as Wu Jieshe or half an acre of fertile land, which is truly enviable. But on the other hand, if you think about it again, this young general of the Eastern thief is equipped with such exquisite armor, and he will definitely not be low in the Eastern army. Generals of this level have already chased after Tongguan, and the Eastern thief army will still be far away. Is it possible that Prince Hungnong's envoy has lost the battle? This is not possible. That young general, you are still young and don't know many joys and sorrows in the world. Don't stubbornly seek death. When you see the general, quickly report your military situation. Yuwen Tai is the most benevolent and righteous. Not only will he not kill you, but he will also reward your female relatives in the fields to settle in Kansai. Can I tell your grandmother? Li Tai lowered his head as he walked in the queue, hearing voices of discussion coming from around him, and for a moment he felt like crying without tears. His ancestors also served as the Grand General of Northern Wei. In his memory, the fine armor was passed down from his previous family, but it was not allocated by the Eastern Wei court. Due to his hasty departure from home, he and his father were only privately recruited staff by Gao Zhongmi, and neither of them had a name or official position in the Eastern Wei court. Don't be afraid, Arang. The military Han was greedy for his achievements and misunderstood. When he saw them, the general explained it clearly and the misunderstanding was naturally resolved. Li Zhusheng, a family member, came up and comforted him in a low voice, then the escorted soldier shouted and scolded him, pulling him away. Upon hearing these words, Li Tai's mood became even more bitter. Previously, when he heard a Western soldier shouting that Gao Zhongmi was being arrested by the left army commander Zhao Gui, he realized that something was amiss. The Battle of Mangshan in the Western Wei dynasty was a disastrous defeat. Whether it was to vent anger or shift blame, Gao Zhongmi, the surrendered person who directly triggered the war between the two countries, was an excellent target. As Gao Zhongmi's subordinates, I and others could still benefit from it. In chaotic times, the territory of soldiers and horses is the foundation. With these, you are a hero. Without these, what are you? Is Ho Jing fierce or not? Once lost the territory of Hunan, in the Southern Dynasty, he was only a homeless dog and used by Xiao Yan of the Southern Liang as a bargaining chip for negotiations with the Eastern Wei. Gao Zhongmi's abilities and reputation are far inferior to those of Ho Jing. Ho Jing at least struggled all the way to Jiankang during the Southern Dynasty. He doesn't remember any other deeds of Gao Zhongmi after the Battle of Mangshan in history. Moreover, even if Gao Zhongmi can still make trouble, he cannot solve his current precarious situation. Even if he could rely on the advantage of a historical prophet to see the opponent's main general inform Gao Huan that he would not pursue with victory, whether the opponent believed he was still in a dilemma, the crucial defeat in the Battle of Mangshan had become a foregone conclusion. May I ask, this military leader, which general is guarding here? At a critical moment of life and death, he worked hard to suppress his fear and calm himself down. He squinted at the swollen eye that had just been hit by some bastard's ice-sealing hammer, turned his head, and whispered to a Western Army sergeant accompanying him. How come you still want to inquire about our military planes? I'll tell you what. The general here is my lord, and several leaders. The soldier of the Western Army gave him a cold look when he didn't get angry, and then sneered. How many leaders? Is this his mother a noun or a quantifier? Are your Western Army soldiers so tight-lipped? It seems like they haven't said it yet. Li Tai dared not ask any more questions, just lowered his head and thought carefully. His own knowledge reserves do not support such precise retrieval, and the memories of his predecessor leave less information. The only person who has an impression of the personnel of the Western Wei dynasty is Xingtai Shangshu and Keifu Li Yuan, who first went to Hulao to pick them up, as well as Keifu Eugene, who once fought side by side and abandoned them in Hungnong. I don't know how many leaders this sergeant answered, including Li Yuan and Eugene, but I won't mention Eugene, the ungrateful old fox. In my previous memory, I had a good impression of this Li Yuan. I warmly sought out relatives when I met him, but the old man Li Xiao was relatively indifferent to him. It seems that this Li Yuan was just a rising star in a chaotic era, pretending to be the Li family of Longxi. But Li Tai doesn't care about this. If Li Yuan happens to be in the city and can save himself, he will definitely represent the Li Tai branch of the Longxi family to recognize this relative. You have to recognize Li Hu, he's a thick thigh. If we can talk about Zhaomu with Li Hu, everyone will make a profit. Thinking about the future, the descendants of Li Tang will all be their own younger generation, which is quite impressive. By the way, his name is Li Tai and he shares the same name as Li Shimon's son. Never mind, let's just talk about the present. I call it Brother Li Hu, and you call it my ancestor. As he was daydreaming, the city of Tongguan had already arrived. Li Taijing planned to look up at the charm of this ancient pass, but was held down and unable to lift his head, so he was taken into the city. The atmosphere in Guanxi is much more oppressive and solemn than on the noisy plateau. A few Western soldiers who were mistakenly arrested and shouted for injustice along the way dare not speak up anymore, but there is a hint of strict military orders. A military officer stood still inside the gate. When he saw their group entering the city, he stopped them and asked questions. After learning about the situation, the officer's expression also changed. He pointed to Li Tai and said in a deep voice, "Bring this thief alone to the hall, and the other miscellaneous members will be detained and interrogated separately by the side fence." After speaking, it was about the two strong soldiers inside carrying stronger ropes and tying Li Tai up, then using their sticks to cross his armpit and dragging him towards the Guanxi Yamen. The thief may seem young, but he still remains calm in the face of danger, showing a bit of courage. However, our military's swords are sharp, and no matter how tough you are, it's in vain. The officer saw that Li Tai was not afraid to plead, and was slightly surprised for a moment. He then sneered and threatened. After hearing these words, Li Tai's lips trembled again. How could he not be afraid of life and death at the moment, but now his heart is filled with a sense of absurdity, both due to his travels and the misunderstanding of his identity by these Western troops. The military aircraft related to the pursuit of the Eastern bandits were not delayed or neglected by the officers. They quickly brought Li Tai to the Yamen and asked the guards on both sides of the Yamen to enter and report. Stupid, a few clumsy fools. I don't speak clearly enough. How can I not write a book? Li Tai was standing on the outside of the Yamen in an extremely awkward position, tied up to the point where his head and neck couldn't be easily moved. While enduring the pain, he was still pondering how to save himself. However, a series of angry shouts and curses came from the Yamen, mixed with a few words from Xianbei colloquialism. His predecessor knew the Xianbei language. After all, North Korea was ruled by the Xianbei people for a long time. Although Emperor Xiaowen changed customs and traditions, the Xianbei people at the lower levels of the countryside were not completely Sinicized. After Gao Huan and other military leaders from Beijing took control of Hebei, the wind in Hebei became stronger. Gao Ao and Chao Wei are renowned, and others, including Gao Huan, do not talk nonsense in front of him. However, as the predecessor of his little fan brother, he obviously does not have this kind of awe-inspiring aura, and it is inevitable to encounter Xianbei language and customs in daily life. So Li Tai can understand Xianbei dialect, but he doesn't know how to speak. His predecessor boasted about his Chinese attire and never uttered a hustle and bustle. As for him, his language is even more unfamiliar. Even if he can understand, he has to go through a few twists in his mind to be slightly distinguishable. Li Tai heard the general's nonsensical and incomprehensible verbal abuse in the Yamen hall, but he was also worried that the anger would be vented on him later. However, a series of verbal abuse followed, which suddenly ignited the flame of hope in his heart. Hangnong has few soldiers, and Wang Xijing's strength is weak and difficult to handle. It is not surprising that he has let down the important position left by De Xingtai. In Kanto and Chang'an, where can't we bury our bones? Even if the eastern bandits pursue us, it is not scary. I only hate Zhao Gui, this dog bandit who abandoned his army and left first, which has exhausted our right army's success and left us alone in battle. I also want to shed my son's blood to block his pursuit. Hateful, hateful. The personal soldiers entered and reported, and the shouting and cursing inside the hall became even more violent. However, when Li Tai outside the corridor heard these words, his eyes suddenly lit up, thinking of who the general in the hall was. Several leaders. It turns out that there are really several leaders. The Battle of Mangshan during the Western Wei and Eastern Wei dynasties was a complex and bizarre process, with both sides experiencing regrettable setbacks and near failure. Therefore, the process of war and the performance of its participants have always been talked about and discussed extensively. If these several leaders were placed elsewhere, Li Tai really didn't know, but if they were placed in the Battle of Mangshan and heard the other party shouting and cursing, Li Tai immediately remembered that they were the right army commander of Western Wei, several Hui. After learning about the other party's identity, Li Tai's mind suddenly flashed with a flash of inspiration. He didn't have time to think carefully and even shouted loudly, "Comrades are friends, enemies are relatives. I and the general hate Xiao Gui, please promote his ugliness and superiority." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Husband defending the way. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Husband defending the way. What person? A heavy footsteps quickly walked out of the hall, and then Li Tai heard the officer who was leading him to this place quickly answer, it was the spy of the eastern bandits captured under the Guanxi plateau. I am not an East Coast spy. Without waiting for the officer to finish speaking, Li Tai quickly denied, I am under the command of the high-ranking envoy of Northern Yuzhou. Li Boshan, the former lieutenant of the Li family in Longxi and the legitimate grandson of Duke Xianjing, recently joined the enemy forces after charging against the enemy in Keifu, staying behind due to injury, and joining forces with the Prince of Hungnong. I feel that I am heading west towards Wangjiao. I can learn from the high-ranking envoy, Yu Keifu, and Wang envoy. He was also eager to survive, and as soon as possible, he spoke about his illustrious family background. He also tore off some of Wang Xizheng's contributions to the empty city plan and placed it on himself, hoping to attract the other party's attention. And repel the enemy. Did the eastern bandits retreat? After hearing this, the general, who seemed to have benefited a lot, approached a bit closer. Li Tai's back of the head was slightly pressed against the stick and couldn't be lifted, only feeling a burly figure looking down at him from above. This posture does not require any deliberate expression management, and he said without blushing or jumping, by the end of the future, most of the bandit army has retreated, with only thousands of cavalry hovering in front of Hungnong city, afraid to attack. Where did he see any bandit army? He opened his eyes and followed them all the way west. However, according to historical records, after the Battle of Mangshan, Gao Huan ordered the return of the army due to the rebellion of many generals, and only sent several thousand divisions to pursue them. He was also scared away by the empty city strategy of the tower defense master Wang Xizheng in front of Hungnong city. Although he appears as a little butterfly in history, his influence on the situation is minimal. Unless he is the illegitimate son of Gao Huan, there is no reason for Gao Huan to go against history and continue to lead troops in pursuit. Of course, the records in history books may not necessarily be true, as there are also many errors and omissions in this period of history. But at least for now, let's save our lives. At best, wait until Gao Huan really kills us, and then find an opportunity to jump over the wall and run over, saying that I am still a loyal minister of the Great Wei, deliberately spreading false information and waiting for the king of Gao to besiege us. Although this idea is a bit unethical, its predecessor was disgusted with the Eastern Wei dynasty due to his youthful patriotism and sympathy for Gao Oucao's personal experiences. But for Li Tai now, both sides are birds of a feather, and joining either side is because I can't do anything about you now. When I seize the opportunity, it's amazing. Can I have your strengths? To say a boastful word, Laozi has great ambitions and a hungry heart. If fate is given, it is only a matter of devouring. Why discern the weight of the fishy smell between the east and the west? Of course, this idea is now just bragging, relieving the tension of life and death, and psychologically arming oneself. He is still uncertain about his life and death, let alone swallowing the west and annihilating the east. This matter needs to be so easy to handle. Can Nanliang Xiaoyan worry about selling himself to Buddhism every day? After a moment of silence, the general moved elsewhere and whispered to the others before returning, then said, "Unbind him." Li Tai finally broke free from his shameful posture. He straightened his waist and moved his hands and feet, and then heard him exclaim, "What a handsome young man, he looks more like a descendant of the Baisian army, not like the Huazu Gao Liang." Li Tai, at the age of 15, is already nearly 1.8 meters tall, and due to his ample diet, year-round archery and horse training, his tall and well-proportioned physique is not large in arms or round in waist, which is commendable. But when he looked up at the other person, he found that the general was even taller than himself, with a round and thick physique that could fit two of him, indicating that Lao Fanyu was speaking. Apart from her sturdy physique, Some Hui may not be considered old in appearance, or may be difficult to discern due to years of military warfare, but she may not be over 40 years old at most. Li Tai remained humble for a few words, but Ruo Ganhui's face darkened sharply and he said in a deep voice, "Who are you and your comrades who share the same grudge?" Zhao Piaoqi is a minister of the legislative yuan and an elder of the military mansion. How can you be ignorant and have children slander and hate you? When Li Tai shouted earlier, he felt uneasy, somewhat of a gamble, but now that he heard a few words from Hui, he knew that this matter was stable. His tone of reprimand was extremely strong, but the three words, Zhao Piaoqi, became noticeably erratic, as if these three words were burning between his lips and teeth for an extra moment. When future generations talk about the Western Wei and Northern Zhou dynasties, they naturally think of the armed groups represented by the 8 pillars and the 12 generals, as well as the Guanlong group, which was based here and built several imperial businesses. Especially the most powerful father-in-law, Dugugushin, may subconsciously think that the Guanlong family is close comrades in arms and friends. But in fact, it's not the case, especially in the current situation. The fierce general in front of me, several Hui, probably has the heart to even kill Zhao Gui. Zhao Gui was ranked among the 8 pillars in the future, but several Hui died on the eve of the establishment of the military structure in the upper echelons of the government. In the Battle of Mangshan, Guanlong Lao de Yuwen Tai led the central army, several Hui led the right army, and Zhao Gui led the left army. At first, on the battlefield, the fierce Eastern Wei general Peng Lu suddenly defeated the Western Wei, and Yuwen Tai was almost killed by Peng Lu. When he was chased, he shouted, "Foolish man! Without me now, how could I have you?" Peng Lu followed suit and left Yuwen Tai to collect the spoils of war before returning. Afterwards, the Western Wei army fought again, and coincidentally, a soldier of the Eastern Wei army jumped back due to violating military laws, informing the Eastern Wei army of the situation. Therefore, Yuwen Tai's central army and several Hui's right army rushed towards the Eastern Wei army formation, and led General He Baixing with 3,000 elite soldiers to directly attack the location of Gao Huan's central army. This time, it was replaced by Gao Huan being chased and almost being picked up by He Baixing's horse spear several times. Fortunately, Dong Wei Duan Xiao and others rushed to rescue him and shot to death He Baixing's mount, allowing Gao Huan to escape. In this battle, both the central and right armies of the Western Wei fought bravely and almost succeeded. However, when the pig teammate went online, the left army led by Zhao Gui was defeated by the Eastern Wei. Zhao Gui was quite familiar with this script, and his response was also quite familiar. He directly led the army to run away, but the left wing of Yuwen Tai's central army was suddenly exposed, and he was also defeated. The right army led by Ruo Ganhui was the most fiercely charged, so he was completely left on the battlefield. Angry, several Hui shouted, "Chang'an died, how strange is it to die here." He then raised a flag to gather the defeated army. The Eastern Wei army, afraid of ambushes, dared not attack, so they let several Hui lead their troops to retreat. When they returned to see Yuwen Tai, they hugged their heads and cried bitterly. The several Hui that Li Tai has seen now are those who have recently left the battlefield. It can be imagined how the several Hui in front of him feels towards Xiao Gui. This big brother from Wuchuan is really unreliable. He left everyone on the battlefield and ran away on his own, which led to the failure of this battle and almost resulted in the downfall of several Hui troops. In public and in private, if Ruo Ganhui still has a good impression of Xiao Gui, then his cultivation is simply a saint. Being too big and useless, or too old to die, are all things that humans detest. Li Tai bowed calmly to several benefactors and then said generously, "My husband is determined to defend the way, the location of the way, and the direction of his body. Therefore, he abandoned the east and fled to the west. The severe punishment in Dongzhou is imposing on the people, but he cannot stop his ambition towards the way. Although Zhao Piaoqi is a precious minister of the country, compared to the way, he is nothing but dust. His ambition is to lose his army, and to vent his anger and surrender to others is to obstruct people from approaching the way. What great evil is it? Boss Han is not talented, and his 7-foot body can be stretched horizontally, and his bones cannot speak bluntly." If Ganhui had listened to Li Tai's statement, he would have remained silent for a moment, and his face, covered in thick hair, could not see any subtle changes in expression. After a moment, he suddenly became furious and pulled out his sword with his back, fiercely hitting the officer who had escorted Li Tai here with the back of his sword. He angrily cursed, "Such a bold and ambitious person, how could he be a spy of the eastern bandits? Dog Eye doesn't recognize true talent, it's tiring me to disrespect the wise man. Damn it, damn it." The officer saw how angry several Hui was, and his expression changed greatly in fear. He quickly kowtowed to the ground and begged for mercy. "I am no longer the one who can live you, disrespectful and wise." Several Hui lifted his legs and kicked the officer over, then handed the handle of the sword to Li Tai with his back hand, saying, "The powerful words awaken the ears and make people excited. This soldier is alive and dead, let's pay for Li Lang." Li Tai naturally didn't know how to take the sword, so he took a small step back and bowed again, saying, "The army of the strong and righteous, it is the will of heaven to live and retreat here. How can I bear to harm it? My troops also took advantage of this intention, but because of misunderstandings and not yet clear, I earnestly request the general to discern. Thank you Li Lang for living with you. His subordinates have also been released." Several Hui then withdrew his sword and gave another command. He looked at Li Tai and pointed to the officer's hasty departure, saying, "If you take the sword, I won't stop you either. I just feel a bit resentful in my heart. The old soldier has been with me for a long time, traveling from Wuchuan to now, and his fame has increased year by year, but his old friends have gradually decreased. Every time I discuss with the old disciple, most of them are sad because of this. What I can't go back to is my youth." Li Tai felt a slight sigh in his heart, even if he was momentarily stunned, and even though several Hui appreciated him for his arguments, he was still in a prisoner's situation now, so there was no need to express such feelings to him. He looked at Hui a few times thoughtfully, and saw a hint of melancholy in the slightly sunken eye sockets. After pondering for a moment, he gradually realized something in his heart. In times of chaos, only the strong can survive. Whether it is the Eastern Wei generals from Huaishua town or the Western Wei generals from Wuchuan town, they are all practicing this principle. But when the basic requirement of survival is met, the various conflicts of interests that come with it become extremely complex, at least not solved by force. Li Lang and I will enter the hall, and your subordinates will be properly arranged in separate camps. Don't worry." Li Tai was still pondering the implications of several favorable words, and Ruo Ganhui stepped forward and patted his shoulder, gesturing. The space inside the yamen is not small, but the layout is simple. Several seats are displayed, and a large armor is placed on a wooden frame, with knife marks and blood stains remaining. It should be the armor worn by several Hui soldiers during their bloody battles in Mangshan. This fierce general's physique is too sturdy, and the armor and defense he uses are so eye-catching that it seems to be labor-intensive and material-intensive. Both sides sat still, seeing that there were still leftover meals on several preferential cases. Li Tai's stomach growled again. After hearing this, Ruo Ganhui laughed heartily and waved his hand to order his personal soldiers to serve food. Soon, the personal soldiers brought 2 pottery jars, one containing rice and the other containing milk. Li Taijing was starving and thirsty, so he didn't care about being shy. After giving a bow and thanking him, he started eating big. Soon, both pottery jars were bottomed out, but Li Taijing still hadn't eaten enough, but he didn't ask for any more food. First, he was embarrassed, and second, the taste was really not good. Several Hui held a few in each hand, with her nails scraping the thick beard under her jaw. She smiled as she watched Li Tai eat. When she saw him put down his bowls and chopsticks, she smiled again and said, "Li Lang's claim to be a decent person really doesn't look like a Chinese paste beam." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Villagers and Villagers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Villagers and Villagers meeting for a short time. Ruo Ganhui has already expressed this emotion twice. In this era, it is not really commendable, perhaps because there is still some doubt in his heart about Li Tai's self-proclaimed family background and identity, but Li Tai only considers him to be expressing his sense of identity. The granary is solid but knows etiquette, and the common people and clans are nothing but ordinary. Impoverished on the way, afraid of unforgettable etiquette, making the general laugh. Feeling no longer hungry and panicking, Li Tai's thinking became more agile, and he did not boast about any prestigious style. "I can't say I'm laughing, I'm not a member of the Li family. I've heard of Li Langxiong's resignation, can I have the opportunity to see him with a strong pen?" Although several Hui were born into the Baisian army, they also had rich experience. Now they were high-ranking generals in the Western Dynasty, and had seen various people before. In front of Li Tai, they restrained their true colors and became more polite in their language. "Please provide paper and ink." After hearing several Hui talk about the main matter, Li Tai quickly spoke up, but his heart still felt a bit uneasy. He was an up-owner in his past life, and he had experience in creating ancient-style copywriting. Occasionally, he would use his brush and ink as materials, with some foundation in writing. However, whether he could match the identity of a descendant of his famous family would inevitably lead to doubt. At present, several Hui still had some doubts about his identity and abilities. When the soldiers sent the ink and paper, he first picked up his pen and dipped it in ink to make a slight sketch, then decided to put it on hold. The battle was not smooth, and the muscles and bones were damaged. "I was afraid that my strength would be dirty. Please speak up in writing." Li Tai decided to temporarily hide his awkwardness, but after hearing this, several Hui did not have any extreme reactions and only had a scribe come through. He saw that when the young man was eating just now, his shoulder and arm strength was indeed a bit sluggish, and there were often pen clerks copying at the large desk office to ensure office efficiency. Although there is even more suspicion about the identity of a teenager, there is no need to reveal it at the moment. He cannot escape in his own army. Li Lang's eloquence is impressive and can be recorded on paper. Although several Hui may not have much literary appreciation ability, he has the ability to distinguish between good and bad words. He is big but useless and never dies of old age. He simply expresses his feelings and thoughts towards Xiao Gui, the useless elder brother of Wuchuan. "Thank you very much, General, for helping me raise my voice on the grand platform and appeal to the mournful surrender." Li Tai quickly stood up to express his gratitude. Guanlong's small circle was very narrow, and he didn't expect to be able to squeeze into the core with just a sudden surrender. He wanted to settle down in Guanzhong and rely on Gao Zhongmi and his own father. Gao Zhongmi has been arrested by Xiao Gui, and it seems that his father Li Xiao is also there. It would be best if we could borrow some favorable channels to persuade Yuwen Tai to order Zhao Gui to release the two of them. Several Hui nodded and raised her hand to signal Li Tai to sit still, while she frowned and pondered. Now, several Hui's mood is indeed eager to eat Zhao Gui raw, but if this hatred is to be implemented in words and actions, he also has many scruples. The complexity of personnel in the Western dynasty was even greater than that in the Eastern dynasty. Even within their small circle of Wuchuan Township Party, personnel disputes are extremely deep. These past conflicts in human relationships could have been covered up due to victories on the battlefield, but now that the army has been defeated by Mangshan, it is somewhat difficult to cover them up. Among the members of the Wuchuan Township Party in Guangzhou, the most prestigious ones are undoubtedly de Xingtai Yuwen Tai and Tai Shi Hebei Sheng, followed by Zhao Gui, Dugu Xian, and others. Although they have made several meritorious contributions, they are undoubtedly young people due to their age. When he followed Hebei into the customs, several Hui were only in their early 20s, and now they are only 35 years old. The attitude of de Xingtai towards the party in Wuchuan Township is losing the people in their hometown and unifying them with loyalty, especially towards the generals in charge, and there are few national laws and criminal sanctions. Even de Xingtai is still like this. If Gan Hui, as a junior generation, were to criticize Zhao Gui, it would inevitably lose the loyalty of his fellow villagers. Especially in the current era of new defeats in major wars and social unrest, a single mistake is highly likely to escalate into a political upheaval. In fact, when he retired from Hungnong earlier, de Xingtai had already called for several Hui dialogues, hoping that he could tolerate each other and not make deep judgments about Zhao Gui's behavior on the battlefield. As a representative of the reputation of the local party, Dugu Xian specially instructed several Hui not to make noise or expose the discord between them during this critical and sensitive season, so as to give others a chance to see and create widening cracks. But the more everyone was like this, the more difficult it was for Ruo Gan Hui to calm his morale. Although he was on the brink of defeat in the Battle of Mangshan, he still had no shame. How come after retreating, Zhao Gui, an old useless person who abandoned the army and left, needs to be nurtured and preserved, while he becomes an unstable factor that disrupts harmony? This tone, Ruo Gan Hui couldn't swallow it no matter what, but she didn't know how to vent it. So when hearing Li Tai's accusation against Zhao Gui, several Hui felt that their words were all in their hearts, giving rise to a sense of pleasure that a close friend was hard to find. What I am angry about is not that my achievements are on the verge of failure. It has been almost 10 years since Wang Nan's expedition to the west, and the existence of puppet officials in Hebei has not been eradicated. Those who claim to be brave in the court should not be ashamed of this. Finally, when the high bandit's humerus is turned upside down and he is offered the tiger prison, he can enter and kowtow to Hebei, allowing me to achieve great unity as a ruler and subject. Although she harbored extreme hatred in her heart, Ji Hui dared not point her finger directly at Zhao Gui, nor did she want to expose the discord and hatred between their fellow townsmen and high-ranking officials in front of Li Tai, who had an unknown background. Therefore, after pondering for a while, she still spoke of the difficulty of rectifying the country. But he rambled on for a while, but Li Tai just didn't say anything. Several Hui became a bit unhappy and his tone sank, saying, "Is it still unwritten?" After hearing this, Li Tai curled his lips. "Your older brother couldn't lift it himself, but instead came to blame me. What kind of existence does the Emperor of Western Wei have in your Guangzhou? Don't you understand? Let me use the righteousness of the imperial authority to criticize Zhao Gui for being ineffective in combat. Are you deceiving me? It has been several years since the demon purple seized Chu." Faced with the persecution of several Hui, Li Tai could only grit his teeth and say that regarding the legal status of the Western Wei royal family, several Hui, an old colleague from Wuchuan, could speak, but he could only downplay the newly attached surrender and could not speak directly. After finishing this sentence, he quickly continued, "If one's own family suffers a disaster, it will be even worse. If a son loses his nourishment and a mother loses her nourishment, she will cry and sustain herself, and every thought will make her more painful. The return of the tiger prison and the battle of Mangshan will bring victory, and the sea will be clear and the river will be peaceful, and the bones and flesh will embrace each other. This is truly a good time bestowed by heaven. Believe this word. Several Huichu didn't quite understand, but after bowing her head and pondering for a moment, her face suddenly changed. She stood up from the table and applauded in admiration, saying, "Good, good. This is truly a great and excellent advice. This Fong is so sinful, this Fong is so sinful." Seeing this reaction from several Hui, Li Tai also laughed and understood that he was the key to his words. The Western Wei and Eastern Wei were both hegemonic regimes, and either side's excessive emphasis on imperial justice was actually embarrassing, which would make the true rulers restless. If we don't emphasize the orthodoxy of imperial power, what should we emphasize? There has always been an answer to this question. During the Wei and Jin dynasties, the imperial power was also weak, so people did not focus on loyalty and righteousness, but on human relationships, filial piety to parents, and respect for siblings. Those famous scholars of the Wei and Jin dynasties were also extremely filial, causing them to become insane. This principle is equally feasible in the Southern and Northern dynasties. In the late Northern Wei dynasty, the imperial throne was repeatedly changed, and the descendants of the Tuoba Yuan clan, regardless of their bloodline, could sit up and sit down. The chaotic Yuan X and XX in historical records made people's scalp tingle, and the imperial power was even weaker than that of the Wei and Jin dynasties. If criticizing Zhao Guijun for his defeat and causing difficulties for the unification of Yuan and Wei, it would be difficult to resonate and even more likely to make people avoid suspicion. But if we look at it from a human perspective, it is much more powerful. The power created by the Western Wei was much weaker than that of the Eastern Wei. As a result, from the powerful Yuan clan to the lower ranks of the Wuchuan nobles, many relatives were stranded within the territory of Eastern Wei and could not meet until their death. More specifically, Li Tai is not clear about the situation, but at least as one of the pillars of Western Wei, Dugu Xian and later the powerful minister of Northern Zhou, Yuan Hu, their close relatives were all exiled to Eastern Wei, and some even reunited only after the fall of Northern Qi. Originally, Yuzhou, north of Gao Zhongmi, had defected. If Mangshan of the Western Wei dynasty won, their closest relatives could have met. However, due to Zhao Gui's incompetence in retreating, their relatives would have to flee to another country and not be able to reunite. Is this grudge significant? As for whether the victory of the Battle of Mangshan in the Western Wei dynasty would lead to the downfall of the Eastern Wei dynasty, after all, it did not happen. Li Tai didn't know that you had to argue with the ministers of the Western Wei who were separated in flesh and blood and eager to see through. He is only responsible for archery, not for argumentation. Li Lang is not an ordinary person, not an ordinary person. If my subordinate's writing skills were as sharp as yours, I wouldn't. Cough, who wouldn't be moved by such heartache and sorrow? Several Hui hates Zhao Gui extremely, but they are hesitant to act out due to various concerns. However, the perspective provided by Li Tai is cunning and ruthless. Don't you believe that you want to protect the local people? It is because of Zhao Gui's military defeat that your parents, wife, and children are still stranded in Dongzhou, and you can still remain calm. Since entering the border, Zhao Gui has relied on his age and hometown reputation, arrogance, and underestimated others. He has led the left army, but has repeatedly failed. Several Hui's resentment towards Zhao Gui has a long history. Previously, it was only due to a difference in age and reputation that they had been holding back. Now, due to the explosion of the Battle of Mangshan and the further stimulation of Li Tai's words, they are no longer hesitant to express their feelings in front of Li Tai. This disciple is the so-called traitor of rural righteousness and the guide of the bandit army. Since Li Tai wanted to rescue Gao Zhongmi and his father Li Xiao, it was inevitable that he would conflict with Zhao Gui. It was inevitable that he would offend him to the end, and his words became harsh. Write it on, don't change a single word. Several Hui steps rushed to the desk, causing a buzzing sound in the yamen. While instructing the clerk, he encouraged Li Tai, keep going, keep going. However, Li Tai was not encouraged by several benefits, and offending Zhao Gui was inevitable, but it did not mean that he would offend Yuwen Tai. After all, he still had to establish himself in Guangzhou. The defeat of the Western Wei dynasty was too tragic. From Yuwen Tai's perspective, the most important thing at present is to maintain stability and quickly restore strength, but it is not to hold the responsibility for the defeat accountable. Moreover, this battle was personally commanded and supervised by him, and the ultimate responsibility for the defeat was to slap him in the face. The accusations against Zhao Gui need to be brought to a close, and the next step is to use limited space to wrap them up. I am not just using my words to incite internal strife among your generals, but to provide you with a clear path for the turbulent Western Wei regime. In the previous chapter, there were several Hui generals who were one of the 12 great generals, and they made a mistake. The generals were appointed to the state of Zhu between the 14th and 5th years of the reign of Emperor Datong. If Gan Hui died in the 13th year of the reign of Emperor Datong, unfortunately, he did not join the army of the state of Zhu. Thank you to the book friend Zhu Qinfu for pointing it out. This is a true expert. The book review section contains much more detailed historical materials about the Battle of Mangshan and the entry list of Bayesian Wuren than I have. I hope the expert can continue to correct the textual research errors. As for the previous text, it was mentioned that the chapter is missing and was not intentionally deleted. We would like to express our gratitude and hope that everyone can see it. Today's second chapter has been sent out in advance. The amount of updates during the new book period needs to be slightly controlled. We apologize for any inconvenience caused and wish everyone a happy life. Pay attention to heatstroke prevention. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Yuwen Black Otter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Yuwen Black Otter. The sea and land sink together, and the way remains like ashes. Although it did not happen at this time, it is still a catastrophe that all the wise and brave people in today's domain cannot bear to face directly. In the spacious hall, a burly middle-aged man with a high nose and deep eyes lay on his side on a wooden couch, which was Yuwen Tai, the Great Western Platform. Yuwen Tai's expression was originally somewhat gloomy, but when he heard the scribe recite to this point, his face softened again and he spoke up. Although one is not well known, his reasoning is relatively smooth. If Huibao's advice is limited to criticism, then I have misread him. Uncle, please forgive me for not agreeing with what he said. In the preface of this book, which word is not a fact. Zhao Gui is not worthy of his position, and he has implicated the army in failure. His wrongdoing is not limited to burying tens of thousands of soldiers from the Hengshe mountain. A young man in his 30s was kneeling down in the hall. Upon hearing these words, he couldn't help but speak up, and his eyes quickly turned red. Poor me, Amodan, I am still in a state of banditry, and I cannot know the fate of life, death, honor, or disgrace. I thought there might be one or two possibilities for the soldiers to return to the tiger prison for support and enjoyment, but I was still ruined by this rural villain. The young man's name is Yuwen Hu, the son of Yuwen Tai's brother Chang'an Wenhao. He was originally a general of the left army Zhao Gui who participated in the war. After the left army retreated, he stayed at Tongguan to gather the defeated soldiers. Now, he returns to Huazhou as several Hui messengers to report. The Yuwen clan also had several relatives who were exiled to the eastern court, including Yuwen Hu's mother. Therefore, when Yuwen Hu heard several Hui's accusations against Zhao Gui in the first half of this report, his emotions were also greatly infected, and his disgust towards Zhao Gui deepened. In this battle, the soldiers of the middle and right armies fought hard, but the left army was defeated by the fear of the main general and the loss of courage in the group. I was in the formation and could see it with my eyes. If it weren't for the left army. Stop talking. In this military campaign, no matter how many of your relatives and superiors are in battle, they have used their intelligence more deeply than you, and they are also more sorrowful and failed than you. Faced with his own nephew, Yuwen Tai no longer concealed his emotions. Speaking of his previous defeat at Mangshan, his expression also showed anger, sorrow, and melancholy. But seeing Yuwen whose face covered in tears, he just sighed and stopped scolding. He raised his hand and said, "Keep reciting. Today, when the court is established, the great hall of rights is equipped with important weapons, governing with benevolence, and those who have lost their hometowns with righteousness. The elders of the Guanxi region are treated with propriety, while those who are attached to the old and new are treated with faith. The great Tao is everything that cannot be ignored, and those who are immersed in it are not of the same kind. Regardless of hierarchy, the use of it is great, and the use of it is narrow, only the great hall of rights can be cut." Upon hearing this, Yuwen Tai's eyes flickered and he once again called the scribe to stop. He sat straight on the wooden couch and looked down at Yuwen who, saying in a deep voice, "This kind of insight is no longer within the reach of Huibao, nor can his subordinate say. Who was it that caught the pen for him?" At this moment, Yuwen who was still immersed in the sorrow of separation of flesh and blood. After hearing this, he only said, "I heard that he was a fugitive from Dongzhou who was arrested in front of the pass. He was a subordinate of Gao Zhongmi. As Gao Zhongmi was arrested by Zhao Gui, he joined the army's tent and begged for advice. Dongzhou has a dense population of talented people, which is indeed more impressive than Kansai people." Upon hearing this, Yuwen Tai let out a sigh, with a hint of envy in his words and demeanor. He then gestured to the scribe to continue reading. In ancient times, great governance techniques were established in the countryside and enriched by the people. They were used for both harmony and justice, with no disadvantages in the future. Those who defeated Qin were not Chu, while those who defeated Deer were supported by the Wei. They benefited the land and promoted morale. Although stubborn thieves were fierce, they were not worth considering. It was better to block morale than to guide them, and to attract them and gather them, and the Wei would prosper. Upon hearing this, Yuwen Tai's expression became somewhat unnatural. His gaze wandered around the people in the hall, feeling a bit uneasy as they were being peeked through. After a moment, he sneered and said, "I thought it was some kind of true knowledge and great tool, but it turned out to be just some kind of crazy talk. Yes, the armored soldiers are the foundation of the dynasty and the weapon to defeat the enemy. If they are stationed in the countryside, they will definitely be strong and aggressive, leaving behind wealth for the people, and the world will inevitably be cunning and rebellious. Although Chu has 3 households, the downfall of Qin will be inevitable. The conclusion in ancient books cannot be questioned and overturned by the false claims of gaining or losing the way." Upon hearing these words, Yuwen Hu nodded repeatedly, saying that whether to speak or not was not a concrete discussion. The fundamental truth he saw in the world was that those who were rebellious and considered wealthy were strong and powerful. Do you also know that the downfall of Qin will inevitably lead to Chu? So, why did Chu defeat Qin? Although Yuwen Tai has little knowledge of books, with the increasing authority, he also pays more attention to the academic study of classics and does not want his subordinates to be all brave warriors who do not know books. He often talks to his own nephews about the principles of classics and history. Upon hearing this question, Yuwen Hu felt somewhat embarrassed and lowered his head for a moment before speaking up, "I know what happened, but I don't know the reason behind it. Xian Wang was brave, which led to the destruction of Qin. Pei Gong and Pei Gong were both wise, which led to the creation of Han. Brave martial arts can lead to achievements, and wisdom can lead to career. This understanding is also correct. However, the downfall of Qin and Chu was due to the Chu people's grievances. With a resentful heart and a high spirit, they were not afraid of strong power and took the lead in facing difficulties." At this point, Yuwen Tai's expression turned to reminiscence. The same principle applies to the Bayesian rebellion back then. Our Bayesian children may not necessarily have the courage to crown the world, but their morale is difficult to balance within a square inch. They want to ask why they treat me unfairly when they are in control of the world. If morale is congested, it will inevitably flood. The old aspirations and spirits of our fathers and brothers have been practiced with flesh and blood, pushing us and others. Our descendants should not easily forget them. This argument, although hasty and vain, is also stronger than your knowledge. I am just not familiar with Han Er's scriptures and phrases, and may not have such poor knowledge as uncle mentioned. Upon hearing these words, Yuwen who felt somewhat dissatisfied. He lost his father when he was young and followed his uncle to various places, experiencing war and turmoil. Although he was an uncle and nephew, his feelings were not inferior to those of his father and son. At this time, when his uncle evaluated him as inferior to a stranger from Dongzhou, he felt ashamed and somewhat disappointed. Having ambition is always good. Yuwen Tai smiled and raised his hand to take some of the notes sent by Hui. He then leaned over to read them carefully and asked, "How many people have written and read this letter?" "I was sent directly to Huazhou by the leader and was presented to the court." Yuwen who quickly said that emotions are emotions, and when it comes to military affairs, he dare not be careless. "You should take a break first." Yuwen Tai sent his nephew out of the hall and raised his head to ask his personal soldiers, "Has Zhao Biao cavalry entered the mansion yet?" The cavalry envoy reported that on the way back, the horse was startled and fell, with injuries to its muscles and bones. "Please return to your mansion after recovering from your injuries to pay respects." Upon hearing the words of the personal soldier, a hint of gloom flashed in Yuwen Tai's eyes. After a moment, he spoke in a deep voice again, "Those who are paying respects on the platform will bring medical officials and medicinal stones to the town to comfort them. Su Shangshu will accompany them and give me the command to have Zhao Piaoqi release Gao Situ, whose subordinate official is named Li Xiao, and appoint him to the office." When his personal soldiers went out to deliver orders, Yuwen Tai picked up the memorial and carefully read it, and asked the scribe to copy several copies. He picked up his own pen and marked all the chapters and sentences related to Zhao Gui in the copies in black. After finishing these, Yuwen Tai ordered to distribute the copies he had smeared to several civil and military ministers in the court. After pondering for a while, he sent the original copy that had not been smeared to the Grand Tutor Hebei Sheng. Utilizing geographical advantages and boosting morale is interesting. Liuhun relied on his strength, but his approach to the virtuous was blocked, resulting in gains and losses. After instructing these things, Yuwen Tai shook his head and sighed, then buried himself in the document filled with cases. After the failure of the Battle of Mangshan, he had too much to deal with and clean up the aftermath, and had no time to focus his energy on something. In the city of Tongguan, 2 days later, several Hui summoned Li Tai to the front and said, "The bandit army in Kanto has indeed retreated, and Daxingtai has sent other generals to guard the pass. I also want to lead my troops back, so Li Lang will go with me." Upon hearing that the subsequent military actions of the Eastern Wei dynasty did not violate historical records, Li Tai also breathed a sigh of relief. His previous ideas were somewhat reckless and underestimated the alertness of the ancients. He even planned to look for opportunities to jump back and survive if Gao Huan's army attacked, but in fact, there was no chance at all. Although he helped several Hui scold Zhao Gui and found an emotional connection with each other, several Hui did not fully trust him, claiming to be treated favorably. In fact, he was placed under house arrest in Guanxi, and even his previous family members were not allowed to meet. Fortunately, the Eastern Wei still retreated, and the mere surrender of a subordinate of Gao Zhongmi was not worth Wang Xizheng's detailed account of whether to cooperate in defending the city. Previously, he boasted that the joint defense of Hengnom was not exposed. Even if exposed, it doesn't matter. The defeat of the Western Wei in this battle made the soldiers worried, and everyone wanted to find an opportunity to bear the responsibility lightly. When they misunderstood him as an Eastern Wei spy in front of the pass, they even expanded their arrest and implicated many innocent people. His unpredictable surrender and exaggeration of his deeds are understandable, and it is not a fundamental mistake to falsely report military information. May I ask, General? After the book is submitted, will there be a reply section on the Daxingtai? If the words and meanings are still not fully understood, Boss Han dares to present his statement in person. The minor crisis here has been resolved, but Li Tai is also curious about the response he received from his letter. After all, it is related to rescuing Gao Zhongmi and his father Li Xiao, and it is also a starting point for him to establish a foothold in life in Guangzhou. When it came to this topic, Ruo Ganhui's face became somewhat unnatural, and she only said to Li Tai, "The Xing Tai is in charge of military and political affairs. After the war, there were many things that needed to be sorted out urgently, and I still have no time to reply." Upon hearing these words, Li Tai's mood couldn't help but sink. It seemed that it would be difficult to defeat Zhao Gui with that letter. Yuwen Tai should have made up his mind to protect this Yuan Tsong general at this sensitive moment. Seeing that Li Tai's expression was different, Ruo Ganhui seemed to feel a bit embarrassed. He stood up and patted his shoulder, saying sternly, "Li Lang doesn't have to worry about it either. You are writing for me and speaking frankly. I will take care of you both in terms of emotions and matters. Boss Han, thank you very much for the general's protection. I'm just worried about General Gao and my own elder." Several Huey's attitude towards him was not to give up immediately, which also made Li Tai have a slight liking for this relatively upright Hu general. Seeing that several Hui was still busy dealing with the withdrawal of troops, he took leave first. This time, several of Huey's personal soldiers did not lead him to the residence where he was placed under house arrest, but instead took him to the camp on the west side of Guancheng. Arang. Seeing Li Tai again, Li Zhusheng and other family members welcomed him, with a face full of joy of surviving the disaster. "It's okay." Seeing these family members who were still loyal to him even in times of crisis, Li Tai felt much more at ease. However, in addition to these dozen or so family stories, there were also more than 10 unfamiliar faces of Hu Han, all of whom referred to him as the master. Li Tai was somewhat surprised. "Let's talk more about it with Arang later." Middle-aged Li Zhusheng saw that Li Taimu was puzzled, so he stepped forward and shook his wrist heavily. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Difficulties of the Overlord. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Difficulties of the Overlord. The soldiers of the Western Army who stayed behind at Tongguan continued to retreat towards the interior of the pass, and Li Tai and his followers also followed along. Although the number of people has more than doubled, it is still just an inconspicuous small team. This is the predecessor of the Imperial Army that will unify the world and build several empires in the future. Dust and sand were flying on the dirt road, and soldiers were dressed in rags, disheveled. An atmosphere of panic and despair filled both the front and back of the team, like a group of refugees who were eating more than the army. Although it was a newly defeated army, what he saw in his eyes was still very different from the military appearance that he had imagined for the soldiers of the Western Wei dynasty, and Li Tai couldn't help but be greatly disappointed. Although the great success of the Western Wei dynasty's military organization in history occurred several years later between the 14th and 15th years of the Datong era, marked by the appointment of upper-level generals such as the 8-Pillar Country and the 12th General, the failure of the Mangshan battle was the biggest motivation for Yuwen Tai to build the military system. But the formation of a military system and the construction of a strong army are not achieved overnight. There must be a solid foundation in order to have a bright future. Of course, if we set aside the high expectations brought about by historical prophets, the defeated army in front of us still has a chance to win compared to the average rabble. At least the basic array can still be maintained. Although the soldiers are discouraged, they also obey the military orders when they stop. Most of them are in their prime, and there is still great room for consolidation and growth. Compared with the Eastern Wei army in the memory of its predecessors, the proportion of Hu and Han soldiers in the Western army is not too severe, basically half and half. Upon closer inspection, the number of Han soldiers even faintly surpasses that of the Hu people, and there are clearly other ethnic groups in the Hu army. Specifically, the proportion of Xianbei people in the team is even lower. This kind of ethnic proportion also has its origins, and the basic origin of the Yuwen Tai mansion in the Western Wei dynasty is already extremely complex. The first to occupy a core position were the old soldiers who followed Erzhu Tianguang and Hebei into Guanzhong to suppress the rebellion, but these soldiers were only less than 3,000 and were also divided into several parts. Such as the Chihu warriors of Erzhu Tianguang, the Dai Di armed forces of Ho Mo Qinyu, and the respective tribes of the powerful forces of Wuchuan such as Hebei. The entire team gradually grew stronger through the suppression, pacification, and reorganization of the rebel forces in Guanzhong at that time, with Han people and mixed ethnic groups such as Di and Chang gradually joining in. Later, Erzhu Tianguang led his legitimate army to Hanlang in Hebei and failed to merge with Gao Huan's army. Hebei became the leader of the army remaining in Guanzhong. It was not until under Gao Huan's scheme of estrangement that the powerful Ho Mo Qinyu of Dai Di killed Hebei, and Yuwen Tai succeeded him as the leader of Guanzhong. Afterwards, Yuwen Tai avenged Hebei, and Ho Mo Qinyu's general Li Bai jumped back and led a portion of the Dai Di armed forces to join Yuwen Tai's team. It was not until Emperor Xiao of Northern Wei fled westward to Guanzhong due to Gao Huan's coercion and brought thousands of Luoyang Imperial guards that the military strength of Western Wei was considered complete. Compared to Gao Huan of the Eastern Wei dynasty who directly obtained tens of thousands of town residents from the Erzhu clan, the formation of the military power of the Western Wei dynasty was much more complicated. In addition to various mergers and defections, the biggest supplement to the Western Wei army was the capture of prisoners from several major battles with the Eastern Wei. Specifically, in every battle, the Battle of Xiaoguan during the establishment of the Western Wei dynasty and the subsequent Battle of Shaiyuan all successfully defeated the Eastern Wei's attack on Guanzhong. Especially in the Battle of Shaiyuan, due to Gao Huan's improper command, the Eastern Wei army lost more than 80,000 soldiers, horses, armor, and staff in World War I. It was also thanks to this brilliant victory that the Western Wei had the confidence to compete with the Eastern Wei, and Yuwen Tai directly incorporated a full 20,000 troops into the defeated army. In the Battle of Shaiyuan, the Western Wei dynasty also took advantage of the situation and captured the Halua region, including Luoyang, which became the trigger for the next major battle, the Battle of Heqiao. In order to establish the legitimacy of the Western Wei regime, Yuwen Tai took the Western Wei emperor to Luoyang to offer sacrifices to the heavens and ancestors, while the Eastern Wei generals Hou Jing and Gao Outsao took the opportunity to launch an attack on Luoyang. This war should be the most evenly matched among the 5 great wars of the Eastern and Western Wei. The Western Wei dynasty won a great victory in the Battle of Shaiyuan a year ago, and their morale and military strength remained strong. However, only some armed forces such as Hou Jing and Gao Outsao participated in the battle in the Eastern Wei dynasty. At the beginning of the Battle of Heqiao, although Yuwen Tai was in danger due to underestimating the enemy and advancing recklessly, he was able to escape with the help of Governor Li Mu's quick and clever rescue, but overall he still started smoothly. Li Tai's predecessor idol, Gao Outsao, died in this war. Just as the battle was raging, a sensational scene occurred in the Western Wei army. At that time, heavy fog fell from the battlefield, and the right army of Du Guxin and Li Yuan of the Western Wei dynasty, as well as the left army of Zhao Gui and Yi Feng, were unable to fight effectively. At the same time, they lost contact with Yuwen Tai and unexpectedly withdrew their troops and ran away. Li Hu and others who led the rear army saw Dugu Xian, Zhao Gui, and others retreating, so they also retreated together and directly threw the leader onto the battlefield. So much so that when Yuwen Tai escaped from the battlefield, he was scared out of his wits and couldn't sleep at night. He had to rest on his dry sun and Han Chinese tycoon Kai Yu's thigh to fall asleep, which shows the great psychological shadow that this defeat and being abandoned by the generals had brought to him. By the time Gao Huan learned about the situation on the front line and led his army to reinforce, the Western Wei army had already retreated to the west of Tongguan. Although the Western Wei dynasty was defeated in the Battle of Heqiao, they did not suffer much damage because everyone was running fast, except for the protagonist Yuwen Tai, who was almost scared out of his wits. On the other hand, the Eastern Wei side suffered losses from the great general Gao Outsao, to the extent that some of the Han people represented by Gao Outsao were once alienated from the Eastern Wei. After the Battle of Heqiao, Western Wei reorganized its armed forces and successfully recaptured Luoyang. Then both sides entered a period of several years of rest, and Yuwen Tai took the opportunity to reorganize his troops, clean up some hidden dangers in the pass, and reorganize his subordinates into the 6th Army, under the direct command of Xingtai, without any major war between them. Next, Gao Zhongmi, the elder brother of Gao Outsao, surrendered to Western Wei from Yuzhou to the north, especially by offering Hulao Pass, an important town in Hunan and the east gate of Hulua, which triggered the current Battle of Mangshan. The Battle of Mangshan, aside from the twists and turns of the war process, basically mobilized the main forces that each country could dispatch. The outcome of the war also proved that, at least so far, the national strength of Western Wei was still significantly inferior to that of Eastern Wei. Li Tai came to this world at this time and defected from the Eastern Wei to the Western Wei. In general, he was really foolish. But in terms of the future, there is also a hint of abandoning the dark and surrendering to the bright, because the disastrous defeat in the Battle of Mangshan prompted Yuwen Tai to make a major decision, which was to recruit Han Chinese tycoons into the army, supplement the shortcomings of the army with local soldiers and secret weapons from Guangzhou, and start establishing the prefectural army system. Undoubtedly, during this period, as a Han Chinese, there were much more opportunities in the Western Wei than in the Eastern Wei. But if we want to be specific about the region, the window of opportunity for the Western Wei dynasty this time is mainly open to the powerful Han people of Guanlong who have different tribes. As a newly acquired villager from Dongzhou, Li Tai's situation is still awkward. The opportunity to join the future Guanlong group and become its core member is still very slim. So when he wrote books for several hui, he also mixed his own private goods and vigorously recruited Han people from Guanlong to arm the stability of political development. Such suggestions are certainly not inspiring. Yuwen Tai is a generation of outstanding people who can withstand the strong pressure of Gao Huan and establish their own business in Guangzhou, and even catch up in the future. Of course, it is impossible not to see the importance of recruiting Han Chinese heroes. Such thoughts and ideas should have been formed in Yuwen Tai's mind for a long time, but the specific measures and steps are still uncertain, and the disastrous defeat of Mangshan has left him no room for further hesitation. Even without Li Tai's proposal, this measure would surely be implemented on a large scale soon. Li Tai does not expect to be treated with utmost respect and honored as a national scholar by Yuwen Tai with just one letter. His main purpose is to express his compatibility with the other party's thoughts through this. My leader and I are close friends of the soul, and I think of everything you think of. If you can't help me, can I help you a little? But he still underestimated the complexity of personnel disputes within the Western Wei regime, or rather, the scale was not precise enough, and the expected results were not achieved. This is also normal. Although he has a foundation in writing due to his profession and has a forward-looking history, he is not a native figure of this era. What we faced before was the old iron of the forum and the audience of the platform, but now we have to strive for the attention of a real leader in troubled times. It is inevitable that the scale of force and the depth of strategy will be a bit difficult to control. But seeing that several hui, as the core figures of the Guangzhou regime, are still willing to provide him with shelter, it can be seen that his suggestions may not have been as expected, at least they did not violate any major taboos, and the problem of survival in Guangzhou is not significant. Yuwen Tai, you are noble and remarkable. If you ignore me, I will go find Yang Jian. In the future, I will do my best to rectify the chaos and restore the Han dynasty. If Yang Jian can't get along, he will ask Li Hu to help my elder brother educate his children and grandchildren. After calculating his intracranial orgasm, Li Zhusheng walked up again and handed him a string of bamboo slips, whispering, "Alung, those dozen or so foreign guest names have already been recorded, and they are all willing to follow Alung." Although the current Western Wei regime is weak and backward, it is not likely to degenerate to the point of bamboo cutting. However, the production of paper is generally not high, and it is not used as a reserve for military supplies. Li Tai cannot find any paper or pens at the moment, and can only use locally sourced bamboo as a brief record. The bamboo slips are engraved with the dozen or so newly joined soldiers of the Western Army. They were mistakenly arrested outside Tongguan as companions of Li Tai, and even if they spoke out loudly, no one believed or paid attention to them. They were still imprisoned together with Li Tai's songs. When Li Tai set up several Hui Fa returns, these people returned them to him as his own, lazy to distinguish their original ownership. Although Li Tai has no experience in rebellion and entrepreneurship, he also understands the principle of prioritizing soldiers and horses in turbulent times. Naturally, he would not refuse these inexperienced heroes, so he first compiled them before proceeding. Therefore, during the march, Li Zhuxing recorded the names of these people as a record. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Difficult Residence in Chang'an. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Difficult Residence in Chang'an. Arang. Master. When Li Tai returned to the temporary campsite from several Hueda tents, more than 30 Ding Zhuang tribe members stood up to welcome him. Dine first. Li Tai waved his hand and pointed to the steaming pottery jar on the stove. He sat on a nearby mound, and when his subordinates were about to serve him a meal, he said, "I have already dined in some of the leaders' tents. You can eat on your own." This may sound a bit contrived, but Li Tai really couldn't bear to eat the military rations distributed by the Western Wei army. The shelled and bran-covered corn beans, steamed in pottery jars, were half-cooked for a meal. He couldn't chew them carefully, otherwise the mixed gravel inside could even shatter his teeth. But even such rough food is only available in limited quantities in the military. Li Tai only received special attention from his subordinates because he received a certain amount of recognition, and there was military food supply for 2 meals a day. But the other scattered soldiers in the army, who were not led by a strong military leader, could not even provide such basic meals in sufficient quantities every day and could only travel hungry. After marching for a few days, Li Tai heard, witnessed, and learned more about the daily life of the Western Wei army. It can only be said that they were hard-working, and ancient people were really much stronger than modern people. Even as a general, the food is only slightly more seasoned with oil, salt, and meat than ordinary soldiers, but this is a delicacy that the vast majority of soldiers cannot enjoy. In terms of material enjoyment alone, even an ordinary person in later generations may far surpass the ancient aristocracy. The improvement of productivity in society is truly reflected in all aspects. After gradually accepting the fact of time travel, Li Tai also wanted to integrate into this era. Every time he went to a camping restaurant, he would approach several Hui's large tents and request a visit under the pretext of discussing matters, deepening his feelings and enjoying meals. Several Hui also gave face, never refusing to see each other. It was probably because he had previously criticized Zhao Guisheng for being somewhat resentful, and because Li Tai came from the Li family in Longxi, he was treated with great respect. Without coming into this world, one cannot understand how much convenience a person's social communication activities are brought by their family background and prestige. Emperor Xiaowen of Northern Wei's Sinicization reform established the system of feudal lords in the form of laws. Under the leadership of Li Chong, the Li family in Longxi jumped to become the top feudal lords in the world. Although Li Tai disliked the outdated concept of respecting social status, he had to admit that wearing this layer of skin, he was truly capable of handling 5 or 6 people. Although several Hui came from Beijing and had a strong aversion to the high-ranking clans who stole power, this aversion cannot be attributed to pure hatred, but is mixed with complex emotions such as envy, jealousy, and ambition to replace them. When Li Tai did not conflict with the capital in terms of position, emotions, and status, Roa Gan Hui was also willing to get along with Li Tai and chat, inquire about some noble family personnel styles and stories of the Northern Wei court's laws and regulations. Li Tai used his past memories and his own associations to cope with these difficulties. During the conversation, he also inquired about the personnel and internal affairs of the Western Wei court, which gave him a preliminary understanding of the environment he was about to go to. Today, several Hui were in good spirits and told Li Tai an interesting story that happened in Huazhou. After reading the prelude book, he Baisheng, also a great general of the Western Wei dynasty, led his family slaves to Zhao Gui's place to smash it. Because he Baisheng's relatives were also stranded within the territory of Eastern Wei, Li Tai's accusations against Zhao Gui happened to hit his heart. When several Hui talked about this matter, Li Tai couldn't bring himself to be happy with a smile on his face. This meant that he had offended Zhao Gui even more harshly but couldn't directly kill him. He Basheng is an elderly member of the Wuchuan group, and even his brother He Baiyue is the leader of the first generation of Wuchuan's powerful forces. He only vented his anger on Zhao Gui, indicating that these old comrades in Wuchuan town have a tacit understanding. They can argue, but they will not kill Zhao Gui. In addition, there is also good news, which is that Gao Zhongmi, who was arrested by Zhao Gui, has been released by Yuwen Taylor's order. Not only has he not been questioned, but the official titles he obtained when surrendering have also been preserved, indicating that Li Tai's petition has also achieved some effect. But there is also bad news among the good news, which is that Li Xiao, the father of this body, did not follow Gao Zhongmi, but stayed behind in the city of Hulao. But news came from behind that Hulao city had been taken by Ho Jing of Eastern Wei, and Gao Zhongmi's family members had also been intercepted, while Li Xiao was nowhere to be found. After learning this news, Li Tai's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He doesn't have any deep affection for Li Xiao, but the father-son relationship is undoubtedly the most reliable connection in chaotic times. After all, their family does not have a dispute for the throne. Moreover, according to several sources, the original Yuwen Tai had the minister of Xingtai, Su Chua, recruit Li Xiao to serve in Xingtai, but as a result, there was no follow-up due to Li Xiao's absence from Guanzhong. Obviously, Yuwen Tai underestimated his youth and did not believe that Li Tai's strategy was his own talent and strategy. He failed to catch the big ones and even forgot about the small ones. Unable to directly connect with Yuwen Tai, the leader of Guanlong, Li Tai was somewhat disappointed, but there was nothing to say. Being able to barely make a living in this turbulent and chaotic world was already considered a stroke of luck. Several Hui also expressed their support for Li Tai and hoped that he could serve as his staff. But after weighing it carefully, Li Tai neither refused nor agreed, only saying that he still needed to consult with Gao Zhongmi, the original lord. After spending a few days together, Li Tai had a good impression of several benefits. Although the person has ulterior motives, they are not deep in nature and have a straightforward and loyal personality. The reason why Li Tai refused was not because he looked down on the other party's future, but because the position of several Hui officials was a bit awkward. In addition to the commander of the Right Army who participated in the Battle of Mangshan, Roa Gan Hui also served as the leading general and was a general of the Western Wei Forbidden Army. After returning to the army, he had to go to Chang'an to serve as a guard. The Emperor of Western Wei was a mascot, and it was also very dangerous. Maybe it would end one day. The Li family in Longxi, where he came from, was already closely related to the royal family of Yuan and Wei by marriage. He couldn't guarantee that the emperor would give him a belt when he saw relatives and had a headache. Should he or shouldn't? It's best to stay away from it, even with a few benefits of protection, it's not safe. Staying in Chang'an is too sensitive and not suitable for any small actions. He doesn't have the qualifications to talk about big ambitions now, but even for self-protection, it's only right to build a small team of trusted followers. Chang'an is obviously not a suitable place. That large jar of grain rice seemed to have a considerable portion, but it required more than 30 strong men to share it, barely enough to eat. It was quickly emptied, and even the edges of the corrugated pottery jar were scraped clean. After everyone finished their meal, they all gathered around Li Tai. Li Tai looked at the dozen or so new recruits and said, "We will arrive in Huazhou in 2 days. I know that you and others originally belonged to each other. If you don't want to follow me and stand in Guanzhong, you can tell me now and I will return your original family. If you want to stay, there are also family traditions and rules in our sect. If you violate them, you will be punished as a slave." Not long after entering this era, Li Tai was not accustomed to treating living people as private property. But before he arrived in Huazhou, he was already involved in the personnel dispute of the Western Wei dynasty, and he didn't know what kind of entanglement and difficulties he would encounter in the future. His subordinates were the most loyal and reliable, and it was better not to stay if they were half-hearted. There are a total of 17 new recruits, including Han people, Di Chang Xiongnu Xianbei Gaoche, and others, indicating the diversity of military clans in the Western Wei dynasty. At this moment, when they heard Li Tai say this, they all seemed a bit flustered. Some clumsy speakers bowed directly to the ground and only said, "I am willing to follow the Lord," without any hesitation. One of the tall and thin Xiongnu people had the most organized words and sincere attitude. The name of the slave was Payeto Bao Lu, and he was a soldier stationed at Duling. The commander died in battle at Mangshan, and many soldiers were scattered. If the Lord did not take care of him, he would definitely be reorganized into the 6th Army. Without the protection of a strong commander, the tragedy was even greater than death in battle. I are old soldiers of the 6th Army, and we rarely have enough to eat when we enlist. Those soldiers and servants, as well as our masters, cherish us. We can only line up and die in battle. Please, Lord, do not expel us. I will work hard." Some soldiers were eager to shed tears, and the 7-foot-old man was filled with tears. His hasty and sorrowful appearance made people sympathize. Upon hearing this, Li Tai was puzzled and said, "The 6th Army is the main force of the Wang Division directly under the Daxingtai, with clear military orders from top to bottom. How could the governance of the army be so brutal?" It was the same old man, Paul, who broke through the wilderness, who spoke up and replied, "The governance of the army in Daxingtai is indeed broad, simple, benevolent, and thick. When I see my soldiers in poverty, I will give them clothes and food, but I don't have a long time to camp and supervise them. There are often famines in the pass, and military resources cannot be allocated regularly. The generals also pay more attention to their private affairs, so no one cares about their lives and lives. If it weren't for being fortunate enough to join the Lord's army in Tongguan and withdraw along the way, how could we miscellaneous soldiers share 2 meals?" Everyone nodded with a sense of concern, and their gaze towards Li Tai, the new owner, was even more earnest and sincere. Li Tai Ben felt that the demoralization of the military in the Western Wei dynasty was far more than just defeat, and only then did he realize that the accumulated shortcomings were so profound. The 6th Army, which should have been the main force of the Central Strong Brigade, has become a despised hardship for everyone. How much combat power can such an army have? Based on this, it is not appropriate to conclude that Yuwen Tai is mediocre and incompetent. The fundamental reason is still the exhaustion of the Guanxi region and the poverty accumulated in the Western Wei dynasty, which cannot even provide basic supplies for military support. It is no wonder that the morale of the army has been scattered. He remembers the historical record of the Battle of Xiaoguan during the establishment of the Western Wei dynasty. The Eastern Wei army attacked in 3 directions, and Yuwen Tai relied on his keen insight to directly attack the Do Tai army of the Eastern Wei to achieve victory. Shortly after the victory, there was a severe famine in the Guanzhong area. Yuwen Tai had to take the risk of leading his army to rush out of Tongguan and eat at Hengnong in the eastern part of the Guangdong area. Only when Gao Huan's army attacked again did he hurriedly rush back to Guanzhong to prepare for war. It was also Gao Huan who underestimated the enemy and rushed forward, eager to seek revenge for Do Tai, that allowed Yuwen Tai to defeat the army with fewer victories in Shaoyuan, and gave the Western Wei regime a strong continuation of their lives. Since you have returned to your new lord and have not made any contributions, you have already enjoyed kindness and righteousness. After keeping warm, you should be grateful and repay your kindness. My family is a famous family in the world, and it is not comparable to your old subordinates. In the coming year, if you accumulate wealth, you will be given the Lord's surname, and our ancestors and descendants will be honored for it. Li Zhuxing took a step forward and looked at everyone with a serious expression. Although not everyone knew about the Li family in Longxi, several knowledgeable people had already nodded repeatedly, their expressions even more excited. Obviously, the temptation was very great. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Arang Weiwu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Arang Weiwu. Shaoyuan is located in the eastern part of the Guanzhong Plain, a sand dune grassland between the Nanluo River and the Wei River in Dali County. Dali County, now known as Wuxiang, is the capital of Huazhou Prefecture. The retreating army from Tongguan did not need to pass through Shaoyuan, and after crossing the Weinan River, they could directly approach Huazhou. But during the journey, several Hui received military orders and led his troops to temporarily station in Shaoyuan, waiting for reorganization and resettlement. Therefore, Li Tai also had the privilege of accompanying the army to visit this site of the Eastern and Western Wei War, and feel the magnificent emotions of the great army fighting back then. When they arrived at Shaoyuan, it was already bustling and bustling. When the team arrived at the Shaoyuan, their morale subsided and the atmosphere among the soldiers became much more lively. They kept hearing people talking about the situation of the Battle of Shaoyuan back then. Back then, it was here that our village soldiers stripped off more than 10 bandit leaders' armor and were given a lot of cattle, sheep, cloth, and silk. At that time, the whole village was filled with the aroma of stewed meat, and everyone was dressed in new clothes. Surprisingly, there were also people in Li Tai's team who participated in the Battle of Shaoyuan several years ago. Li Tai called them over, and they were a strong Han soldier in his 20s named Lu Sanju. He was originally silent, but when he arrived at the early battlefield of Shaoyuan, he became much more active. Sanju, you were only in your teens back then, but you actually had the courage to participate in the war. Li Tai looked at the strong man and asked with a smile of interest. The Battle of Shaoyuan occurred in 537 AD, and it has been 6 years since then. At that time, there was a Langzhu who was so big now, how could he dare to participate in the war? Suddenly, the bandit army crossed the river from Pujin, bypassed Dali city, and crossed the Luo River. At that time, the village was only frightened, and the bandit army were all tigers and wolves from the north, causing harm to not only Hebei, but now they have rushed into Guanzhong. When it came to the old fears, Lu Sanju still had lingering palpitations, but soon his expression became uplifted. Everyone fled into the wilderness under the leadership of the village elders. After hiding for a few days, they heard that the eastern bandits had been defeated, and there were also village princes who came to call for troops. Young villagers followed suit and confiscated them along the Luoshui River. Those weapons, sticks, cows, and horses were really fat for a while. Dali City is the city of Huazhou and also the seat of Wuxiang County. However, the administrative divisions of the Western Wei dynasty underwent frequent changes, and the villagers still used to refer to them as such. Originally, it was just a smooth sailing battle with the main team, but this statement also revealed a few pieces of information. The first reason is that Yuwen Tai did a good job in united front work, and most of the people in Guanzhong were resistant to the invasion of Gao Huan's army. The second reason is that there is a trend of martial arts in Guanzhong Township, and as long as the local elites recruit soldiers, they will actively recruit. Although Gao Huan and Yuwen Tai both came from Beijing, their respective styles also differ due to their different power structures. Although the Six Towns Rebellion in the late Northern Wei dynasty was known as an uprising, there were indeed many atrocities committed, especially the years-long destruction of Hebei, which made the people of other regions feel extremely cold and wary of the Six Towns soldiers. Gao Huan has established himself on the basis of the Six Towns, but of course, he should also pay attention to safeguarding the interests of the Six Towns. Just before the outbreak of the Battle of Shaoyuan, historical records vividly recorded a story of him indulging in the illegal activities of the powerful Six Towns. Yuwen Tai, on the other hand, was different. At the beginning of his entry into the pass, he paid attention to uniting the masses due to his weak military strength, and did not publicize his Xianbei style, which also led to some of the powerful Guanlong people joining him one after another. The harmonious relationship with Guanlonghao was also one of the reasons why Yuwen Tai was able to succeed as the leader after the death of Hebei. Guanzhong was formerly known as the Heavenly Mansion, but since the Wei and Jin dynasties, it has been filled with miscellaneous Hu tribes. To this day, there are still many Xiao Xiong Hu tribes who have guarded their homeland for hundreds of years, and their customs are also fierce and brave. If effectively integrated, they will not be inferior to the so-called national confidants of the Six Towns. Nowadays, the sand garden is somewhat unworthy of its name, with no more sand dunes and lush trees. There are also large grasslands enclosed for grazing cattle and horses. After the Battle of Shaiyuan, Yuwen Tai ordered every soldier to plant a tree. Several years have passed, and not only has the prevention and control of soil erosion been effective, but this place has also become a popular destination for many veteran soldiers of the Western Army to visit Myanmar. Old soldiers are often seen wandering in the forest between camps, occasionally shouting excitedly, "I planted this tree, but I didn't expect it to be big and close by." There were also old soldiers crying and saying, "Back then, I advised Brother A to plant the longevity tree, but instead planted the willow. The tree is still there, but there is no one left." In his lifetime, he will be called the Eastern Thief's blood debt for blood compensation. Hearing and witnessing the various aspects of life, Li Tai gradually understood why Yuwen Tai ordered the defeated soldiers to come to Shaiyuan to station. He didn't know if Yuwen Tai had read the biography of Huan of the Eastern Jin dynasty, or heard the saying, "Wood is still like this, how can a person be worthy?" But the emotions contained in the trees planted in the Shaiyuan are much more magnificent than those of Huan back then. Here, it records the most glorious victory since the establishment of the Western Wei dynasty, and the cohesion and motivation of the military morale are undoubtedly more than 1,000 words. Especially for those veteran soldiers who had fought for several years, as they returned to their homeland, many emotions grew in their hearts, and the gloom of the defeat in Mount Mang was greatly dispelled. After the team was stationed, several Hui left Shaiyuan and headed towards Huazhou Bafu. Li Tai and his team also received preferential treatment, enjoying an independent small camp on the west bank of the Luoshui River and not mixing with other troops. Although Shaiyuan had a special meaning for the Western Wei army, he was not an old soldier who had entered Guanzhong in his early years. After feeling a sigh of relief, he let it go without much emotional excitement. However, influenced by the atmosphere of this camp, his mood inevitably became heroic and magnificent, and he developed a great interest in researching the combat effectiveness of himself and his subordinates. This is not a scholar and playboy who is indifferent to all aspects of life, and this is what Li Tai is most satisfied with. As a soul that has traveled through later generations, he does not aspire to become a brave general and military king, but since he has thrown himself into chaotic times, he can have a certain level of combat power and naturally has a bit more confidence when facing danger. After marching for many days, he had adapted to this body a lot. Originally, he rarely rode horses, but due to his physical memory, he gradually mastered equestrianism. And before several Hui left the camp, he shamelessly begged for a horse spear. Outside the reed marshes by the riverbank, Li Tai galloped his horse while wielding his spear, accurately picking off the fluff on the end of the reed. His attendants applauded and cheered, "Ulung is mighty. This spear is still too light." Li Tai rode back and shook his slightly sour arm, while the memories and experiences naturally generated by the muscles of his arms were still somewhat unfulfilled. It can be seen that my predecessor was not someone who loved to be playful, but truly practiced various martial arts. Yeah, this spear is too bad. Unfortunately, Arang's old spear was left in Hungnong. That spear was made by Arang himself, and if it weren't for the critical situation at the time, he wouldn't have been willing to discard it. Li Zhuxing took Ma Shuo and weighed it in his hand, shaking his head and sighing. In later generations, when it comes to the horse spear, it is given various prestigious titles, and the craftsmanship of making the horse spear is even more exaggerated. It takes 3 years for it to become a masterpiece. In fact, as a weapon for cavalry, there are not many myths about the spear, and generally, compared to the spear, the length of the spear is longer. The saying goes that 1 inch is long and 1 inch is strong, but in highly mobile cavalry combat, the advantage of long weapons is more obvious. Before the army was heavily equipped with stirrups, being able to gallop on horseback while ensuring flexible control of long weapons was undoubtedly a first-class elite soldier, and the stirrup became synonymous with elite soldiers. After the popularization of stirrups, the flexibility of cavalry was enhanced, and the standards for using stirrups were also lowered. Therefore, during the Northern and Southern dynasties, the horse spear had basically become one of the standard weapons for cavalry combat, and the term spear became widespread. In general, the title of Heavenly King was exclusive to the Hu ethnic hegemons during the Northern and Southern dynasties, but later became a term for praising literary and artistic workers. But ultimately, the horse spear is just a type of long weapon for cavalry combat, and its manufacturing process and materials are not fundamentally different from spears. It cannot be said that it takes 3 to 5 years or 10 years to complete. During the Northern and Southern dynasties, there were frequent wars, and many descendants of aristocratic families inevitably joined the battle line. Therefore, the preferred cavalry weapon was naturally the horse spear, which had a natural advantage. Therefore, powerful sons such as Gao Outsao are known for their martial arts skills. These powerful children come from wealthy families and strive for excellence in their own armor and staff allocation. Their respective armed levels obviously do not have universal representativeness. Prosperity and frugality are determined by people. Even if you spend 30 or 50 years building a horse spear, it will be up to you to start from the Northern Zhou dynasty and dominate at the end of the Sui dynasty. But if we argue based on this that Ma Shuo's aristocratization is clearly biased. The horse spear that several Hui gave to Li Tai was not a spear made of bamboo and wood craftsmanship in later generations. It was a thick and hard wooden pole, weighing about less than 20 pounds, but Li Tai could already feel its killing power when waving it. After all, the rate of Western troops being defeated by Jia is not very high, even if it is a secret song by the general, it is only about 30%, and ordinary soldiers are even fewer. In such a situation, Ma Shuo's pursuit of the tedious craftsmanship of later generations is to make himself unhappy. 3 years is enough time for the establishment of a political power, and as the main weapon of cavalry in the Northern and Southern dynasties, the first batch of Ma Shu has not yet been developed. Isn't this a joke? So regarding the understanding of Ma Shuo, striving for excellence and standard equipment still need to be treated differently. The development of weapons is included in the development of tactics and is a part of the history of war. Simply mentioning a particular weapon in a book would appear dogmatic. Li Tai practiced on his own and had his subordinates take turns playing, each with varying performances. Some even struggle to ride horses, while others are skilled in horsemanship. However, with the addition of a spear, they are somewhat reluctant. The best performers are the family members who followed them from Qinghe, Hebei to this place. After the drill, the members of the Western Army who joined later looked a bit hesitant, with the worst performing being the Han soldier Lu Sanju, who couldn't even sit steadily on his horse and was thrown off. I grew up in the village walls since I was young, so I didn't have the opportunity to learn equestrian skills. I earnestly request the Lord not to drive me away, but to line up and kill enemies. Not only is it my skill, but also my courage. Give me a knife, catch and fight, and I will definitely live. Lu Sanju performed the worst, feeling both ashamed and worried, lying in front of Li Taizu trembling and pleading. Li Tai bent down to help up the strong soldier, patted the sand on his knee, and smiled, saying, "There is no need to talk about the past. Entering my door is a new life. The day before yesterday was clumsy, and the day after tomorrow is clever. Who could have predicted it in advance? The world is uncertain, and my husband is not in vain. Whether it is good or bad is in the future. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. He Ba Pa Hu. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 9. He Ba Pa Hu. In the following days, there were people and horses stationed here in Shaiyuan, as well as teams that had already been stationed, and it is unknown where they were dispatched. Several Hui were not in the camp, and Li Tai did not know any other Western Wei generals, so he naturally had no way of knowing the upper echelons of Western Wei. It can be seen that his luck is not bad, and he was able to meet the upper-class generals of the Western Wei dynasty and receive care from them at the beginning of his journey. During this period, he also saw the interaction between the soldiers of other camps, and those generals had the authority to take life and death from their subordinates. No wonder when Li Zhuxing was outside the Tongguan Pass before, he stopped his idea of impersonating a branch of Wu Zhiqi. If he were to be reorganized into a certain general's team and become his private unit, it would be difficult to escape. Even for now, if Ji Hui decides not to let him go, he actually cannot escape. Although he may not necessarily fall into the misery of ordinary soldiers and slaves, his personal freedom is not under his own control. Taking advantage of these few days of leisure time, in addition to practicing equestrian skills and striving to fully master the combat experience accumulated by his predecessor, Li Tai also took a lot of time to talk and exchange ideas with his subordinates, deepening their feelings. The origin of the Western Wei army is diverse, which makes ethnic bullying rare in the military, reflecting more of the identity gap between superiors and subordinates. Li Tai saw a Han general who, due to the negligence of his subordinate Xianbei soldiers in raising horses, directly hung him outside the camp and beat him. There were also many Xianbei soldiers who passed by, but no one spoke up and stopped based on the emotions of their ethnic group. This kind of atmosphere is different from the Eastern Wei atmosphere in my predecessor's memory. The Eastern Wei side can truly feel the contempt and oppression of the Han people by the Xianbei ethnic group. Even if encountered on rural roads, Han people would have to avoid the way out and let the Xianbei people go first. It is precisely because of this that Li Tai's predecessor worshipped Gao Outsao, a Han Chinese tycoon who dared to openly offend and resist the Hu people, in the same way. In the Western Wei dynasty, the contradiction between Hu and Han was not strong, but the class concept was stronger than that of the Eastern Wei dynasty. Those soldiers and slaves were equivalent to taking the owner's private property, and even if they were not satisfied, they would be punished casually by beating and scolding. In terms of social order, both sides have their own shortcomings. After all, they all inherited a portion of the various drawbacks of the late Northern Wei dynasty, and neither of them can be considered politically upright. Relatively speaking, Li Tai still prefers the atmosphere of the Western Wei dynasty. After all, here he can also be considered a ruling class with tribal private soldiers. But in the Eastern Wei dynasty, even though they came from a noble family, they still had to fight and tremble due to the rampant lawlessness of the Xianbei people. Where the buttocks are, the head is there, truly. Perhaps it is also because of the long-standing concept of obedience to superiors, coupled with the fact that Li Tai is not as vicious and harsh as other powerful military leaders. Those newly added tribes quickly adapted to their obedience to Li Tai, and even put themselves in the groom's shoes and suggested settling down in Guanzhou. Although Huazhou is close to power, it is located in the Kanto region and is often plagued by wars, making it difficult to settle down and buy properties. Yongzhou has many wealthy families, and they are particularly resistant to outsiders entering their hometowns. Zhuxin has a stroke, and Baolu, who breaks the wild head, has the most agile eyes and minds. Although he is a Hu person, he has also settled in Guanzhou for several generations. When talking about the advantages and disadvantages of various regions in Guanzhou, he speaks in a clear and honest manner, like an old Guanzhou. If the Lord wants to enter the village and establish stability as soon as possible, buying a property in Xianyang is the safest. Xianyang has a prosperous feng shui and is close to Chang'an, and there are no strong ethnic and miscellaneous Hu disturbances. If there were any options, Li Tai would be willing to listen to his subordinate suggestions, but his future is still uncertain, and listening to these surface local feelings can only broaden his horizons. 10 days later, Ruo Ganhui's personal soldiers came again to send a message and summon him. Li Taizheng was worried about his future situation and immediately followed suit. In addition to the large accounts of several Hui soldiers, there was also a team of more than 10 unknown Jia soldiers, probably the personal soldiers of the Western Wei generals who followed Hui back to the camp as guests. During this period, the Western Wei dynasty was filled with stars, and there were several relatives and ancestors of future founding emperors. Li Tai often had an impulse to get to know and interact with them, naturally curious about who was the guest in the tent. As he stood outside the tent waiting for the announcement, he heard cheerful laughter coming from inside. After being allowed in, he stepped up and walked in. The first thing that caught his eye was undoubtedly the burly body of several Hui people. Next to Gan Hui, there sat a Hu person who looked like he was in his 50s. Li Lang, come quickly. I want to test your eyesight. Do you recognize this famous hero at the table? Seeing Li Taixing coming, several Hui smiled and looked at the Hu person sitting next to him. A world-renowned hero. Upon hearing this evaluation, Li Tai instinctively thought of Yuwen Tai, but seeing that although the Hu man had a graceful and majestic posture, his seat was on par with several Hui, it was obvious that he could not be Yuwen Tai. But besides Yuwen Tai, what other people in the Western Wei dynasty can be called famous all over the world? Although the 8 pillars of later dynasties were renowned, for the time being, most of them were only regional powerful generals. Or it cannot be ruled out that some Hui was praising his colleagues, which would broaden the scope. Western Wei was originally a hegemonic regime mixed with Hu and Han. Don't make things difficult for the younger generation. When I became famous, his mother and fetus had not yet been trusted. The Hu man was also looking at Li Tai with great interest, and after a moment, he smiled and said, "My name is Heba Pahu. I saw De Xing Tai transfer the document and wanted to see who made this official seal. Therefore, I returned with Hui Bao and asked him to introduce me. It turned out to be Grand Tutor Heba, disrespectful and disrespectful. The young man is clumsy and ignorant, but Grand Tutor's reputation is also thunderous. Unexpectedly, Grand Tutor condescends to come and see him, which is truly frightening." Upon hearing the other person's self-introduction, Li Tai suddenly realized. It turns out that several Hueys so-called fame is all over the world, but it's not just a boast. The man in front of him is actually He Baisheng. The 8 Pillars Kingdom of the Western Wei dynasty, which has been passed down to later generations, including its leader Yuwen Tai, is considered a minor compared to He Baisheng. Even the leader of the previous generation of the powerful Wuchuan, He Baiyu, was just a younger brother in front of He Baisheng. He Baisheng indeed gained fame early on. When Gao Huan of the Eastern Wei dynasty was still silent and unknown, he became famous in Beijing for suppressing the rebellion in the 6 towns. So when he became famous, it's not wrong that Li Tai didn't even have a fetus. He Baisheng has been famous for nearly 20 years, and this person is only 15 years old. In addition to his prominent reputation in the Northern Dynasty, He Baisheng also lived in the Southern Yang Dynasty for several years, and later famous figures such as Du Guxin and Yang Zhong were all his generals. And this person is not relying on the elderly to sell off their skills. In the recent battle of Mangshan, he fought bravely and drove Gao Huan away in a state of embarrassment. Li Tai was indeed a bit excited when a majestic figure in history appeared vividly in front of him. Previously, several Hui mentioned that He Baisheng had led his family's slaves to provoke Xiao Gui, and in this matter, he was clearly an old comrade worthy of making friends and showing goodwill. However, upon hearing He Baisheng's self-introduction, Li Tai still felt strange. He Baisheng broke his beard. "Aren't you just a Hu? When I get tough, I even do it myself. Is that what I mean? Clever words and charming expressions. With your age and growing up in Dongzhou, I'm afraid you've heard more about my bad deeds. Upon hearing Li Tai's praise, He Baixing sneered coldly, but his expression was not angry. He looked at Li Tai a few more times before laughing again and saying, "Your father is Li Xiao. Uncle Hu of the first uncle's family, Lu Shuhu. When I was in Jingzhou back then, Uncle Hu was an old colleague of my Changsha. After many years of absence, how is he doing in Dongzhou now?" Upon hearing these words, Li Tai was taken aback. After searching through his memories, he finally remembered that there was indeed a relative like Lu Shuhu. However, in my memory, there were not many contacts. He lived in Qinghe, while Lu Shuhu lived in Fanyang. Currently, there were no high-speed trains or airplanes, and even if his close relatives were separated, it was not easy to meet them. After returning to the north, my uncle settled in the village, but he often regretted not being able to do everything well when he assisted the envoy. Li Tai spoke politely, but he was not familiar with the experience mentioned by He Baixing. However, knowing that He Baixing surrendered to Nanliang around that time may not be a good memory. Upon hearing these words, He Baixing's expression flashed with a hint of melancholy, and then sighed, "Time is also destiny. He doesn't blame me for being stubborn and narrow-minded, as long as he doesn't blame me. But now that we can still be safe, there is nothing to regret. The Li family in Longxi is worthy of the reputation of the world, with countless old memories. Surprisingly, you two still have such a connection. Brother Heba, when you introduced me before, you didn't mention this level. Why, you were happy to see someone and wanted to take someone from my account. Although Li Lang is young and talented, I am not willing to let him go." Several Hui listened to these two people reminiscing about their past, then smiled and pointed to Li Tai, saying, "As we mentioned before, the Xing Tai sent me to govern Qinzhou, but our troops are actually lacking in talent. Would Li Lang be willing to accompany me?" Upon hearing these words, Li Tai's heart suddenly moved. He was not willing to follow after several Hui before, partly because he didn't want to get too close to the awkward figure of the Western Wei Emperor. He didn't expect that several Hui would be transferred from the leading general to the governor of Qinzhou. Qinzhou is located in Longyu and can also be considered as the local area of the Li family in Longxi. Mangshan has suffered a new defeat, and the current Guanzhong area is clearly sensitive to personnel issues. If Li Tairua follows him, he can not only avoid getting involved in this complex personnel dispute, but also focus on managing local personnel under the care of several governors, such as Hui, which can be considered a good place to go. Li Taishang pondered and weighed, but He Baixing had already spoken up, pointing to several Hui and cursing, "You, a veteran of Beijing, actually know how to pacify the wise and virtuous." However, although Li Lang is famous for his family's intelligence and talent, he is still young and appointed as the assistant of the county. Good governance cannot bring glory, while bad governance can ruin the reputation of the family. Don't mention this matter again. His family ruler's fate is unknown, and he may not be in the mood to go to outer states with you. Li Tai did not expect He Baixing to take over and refused to recruit on his behalf. He did not have any stubborn aristocratic views and believed that the county officials were corrupt officials. However, he could not ignore He Baixing's second reason. So he could only bow his hand and say, "Thank you very much, Grand Tutor Heba, for speaking up to me. I also thank several envoys for their favoritism and requisition. However, I am immature and indecent, unable to be promoted, and worried about my family's affairs. I can only regret and thank you." Although several Hui felt a bit regretful after hearing these words, even the elder brother of Wuchuan, He Baixing, spoke up and did not continue this topic. After the three of them sat still and chatted for a while, He Baixing stood up and bid farewell, looking at Li Tai and saying, "The military camp is full of fierce energy and not a place to live for a long time. If you don't have much concern about it, Li Lang will go with me to Huazhou." After hearing these words, Li Tai was taken aback and couldn't figure out why He Baixing was so enthusiastic about him, as it was just his first meeting. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Gathering in Kansai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Gathering in Kansai. Several benefits are genuine but not tangible, appreciated in words, but given as a humble gift. After leaving the military camp, He Baixing glanced at Li Tai's disheveled mounts and said with a smile. Li Tai's attitude towards He Baixing was somewhat skeptical, and upon hearing these words, he only said, "The giant bandits have not been eliminated, and all the characters need to do their utmost. Boss Han is not a brave warrior of the country who is fighting against bandits in an array. Even if there are good horses, they are just idle. Some generals use their strength, but they do not deliberately harm me." Upon hearing Li Tai's words, He Baixing smiled again and said, "He is truly the nephew of Lu Shuhu, and his words and actions are quite similar to your uncle." He Baixing and his followers had horses for everyone, while Li Tai's more than 30 followers could only walk. The group walked for half an hour before reaching a ferry crossing on the west bank of the Luoshui River. "You can use another boat, I'll cross with Li Lang." He Baixing gestured for several personal soldiers to board the ship and ferry, while he himself and Li Tai boarded the ship and sat down. After the ship left the ferry, He Baixing looked at Li Tai with a smile and said, "Did you blame me for blocking your future in several welfare accounts before? How could it be? Bo Shankai is young and clumsy, and the safety of Lord Kuang is unknown." At this point, Li Tai certainly wouldn't say that he was once tempted, but would only repeat the previous reasons. Your family gentleman's deeds were often mentioned by Lu Shuhu in old years. The Han disaster was not enough to harm him, and the loss of the tiger prison was only a small calamity. The eastern thief Ho Jing had already captured the Gao Zhongmi family members, but your family gentleman was nowhere to be found, which is also good news. The Han disaster mentioned by He Baixing refers to the Han incident that occurred more than a decade ago. Zhu Rong led his army into the court and killed 1,000 or 2,000 officials and aristocratic families in the court. The Li family in Longxi, as an aristocratic family during the Northern Wei dynasty, suffered heavy casualties in this incident. Li Tai's predecessor's father, Li Xiao, was not involved in the Heian incident on the day of the incident due to his official robe being bitten by a mouse, so he survived. Most of his fellow brothers were killed. In the memory of his predecessor, after experiencing the Han incident, his father Li Xiao felt the cruelty of political struggle, and since then, he has lived in seclusion in the countryside, no longer keen on political maneuvering. Even being appointed as a staff member by Gao Zhongmi this time was coerced by him. Their father and son did not have official records in the Eastern Wei court, but the Hulao city was broken and their father was nowhere to be found. Perhaps they were worried that if they were arrested, they would be guilty and implicate their own party, so they fled and disappeared, or they might have died in the chaos of the army. I also pray for the mercy of the heavens, that adults can continue to be spared from disasters. But the separation of flesh and blood will ultimately be painful. Li Taiyan couldn't help but reveal his feelings, and it comes to this section. Who said it's not? After hearing this, He Baixing also sighed, and his sons were also stranded in the territory of Eastern Wei. Talking about this topic, he felt equally sad in his heart. Feeling that the atmosphere inside the cabin was too low, He Baixing raised his hand and patted Li Tai's shoulder, laughing and cursing, "You're not a cautious and minimalist person either. I know that your report has caused me a lot of trouble. I really don't know, I earnestly request your guidance, Grand Tutor." Upon hearing this, Li Tai couldn't help but panic and quickly said, "There is no need to be unfamiliar with the title. Lu Shuhu is not only my old relative, but also my close friend. You are his nephew, so if you call me uncle, I can also afford it." He Baixing no longer intimidated Li Tai with a stern expression, but sighed and said, "De Xing Tai gave me your original book, but used ink to paint chapters and phrases related to Zhao Gui and then distributed them to others. Can you see the reason for this? Is this a case of De Xing Tai hating Zhao Gui for tiring his army but not willing to bear punishment, using only the position of Grand Tutor and uncle to teach him a lesson as a senior villager?" Li Tai didn't expect such a hidden situation to exist, and after hearing this, he pondered for a moment before saying it again. Indeed, he is the nephew of Lu Shuhu, with a somewhat unruly demeanor of a political strategist. Zhao Guojuan's defeat is a fact, but it is not convenient to punish him on the grand platform, so he only pushed me out to be a villain once. Zhao Gui and I had no grudges, but on the contrary, I still wanted to accept his old love, but now I want to see each other. Do you think this is the trouble your kid has caused me? He Baixing patted Li Tai again before sighing and saying, the complexity of personnel in the Western dynasty is far beyond your imagination. Several Hui Bao's appointment to Qinzhou also has the profound meaning of seizing Dugu Ryuan's power. Don't think that you can predict everything by learning some political skills, and rashly get involved in personnel disputes that you don't have the ability to handle. Upon hearing these words, Li Tai was truly shocked. He had thought that following several Hui to Qinzhou could avoid Zhao Gui's entanglement and revenge, but he did not expect that if he did choose this way, he might even offend Dugu Xian. It seems that the profound and complex personnel disputes during the Western Wei period were far from as simple as the superficial knowledge I saw in historical books. If he wants to take advantage of the historical prophets and act rashly, he really doesn't know how to die. Seeing Li Tai's eyes staring blankly, as if frightened by himself, He Baixing smiled again and said, "Do you want to know what Daxingtai thinks of you? The Xingtai gathers all the opportunities inside and outside, yet he has leisure time to explore, isn't it, kid?" After feeling the complexity of personnel in the Western Wei dynasty, Li Tai was also reflecting and introspecting, but he was also curious about the opinions and evaluations of Yuwen Tai, the great figure who created the Guanlong group, on himself. The Xingtai watches your writing, saying that you are strong and courageous, not a descendant of those who have long been wronged. How about it? Is it an honor or a terror? He Baixing looked at Li Tai, whose face was constantly changing, and said with a somewhat wicked smile. Li Tai wiped the sweat off his forehead with a dry smile and said, "I am both happy and afraid, but I never expected that my momentary awkwardness would lead me to such a ridiculous praise from the Grand Hall. I have been academically inexperienced since I was young, and I love to discuss emotions, conceal my shallow ignorance, and flaunt my intelligence by picking up people's teeth. You are a young disciple in Dongzhou, how can you have a deep understanding of the personnel in Guanxi? The Xingtai thought that your enlightenment was due to family tradition, but I saw from this article's strategy that it was taught to you by Lu Shuhu. It seems that he still cannot let go of his past resentment of not being able to stand on his own. He returned to his hometown to reflect, and his insights are much deeper than before." As he spoke, the ferry was about to dock, and He Baixing said sternly, "If you come, then take it easy. Uncle Hu is my old colleague, so you don't feel lonely here. But try not to do foolish things like making rash remarks before. Even if the Tiger prison is defended well, the army will not be able to drive away Hebei for a long time. Those who know this matter know it well, and the resentment of the villagers is not something that your child's careless words can incite, but only to provoke resentment and hatred. I understand, I will always remember my uncle's teachings." After talking to He Baixing, Li Tai also realized that his so-called historical prophets were indeed somewhat unreliable when faced with specific situations. In the late Northern Wei dynasty, amidst various wars and disturbances, which one stood out as a simple figure. Playing tricks has become an instinct for them to survive and thrive, and their own careful thinking is not enough. After the ferry docked, the group continued on the road. Along the way, He Baixing also looked like a friendly elder, asking about Li Tai's academic skills and sharing some of his views on children's education. A hint of melancholy appeared in his eyebrows and eyes, probably thinking of his scattered sons. After communicating all the way, Li Tai couldn't help but have a good impression of He Baixing. He could see that He Baixing's kindness towards him was indeed a kind of care for his old friends and juniors. After all, he had no wealth, no power or reputation at the moment, and there was really nothing worth the other party's greed for. After the defeat of Mount Mang, the current situation in the Western Wei dynasty was turbulent, and many disputes were left in history, perhaps only a few records, but it is unknown how many people's joys, sorrows, misfortunes, and blessings were hidden inside. Even if he doesn't consider having something to do in this era, just to meet the most basic need for survival, Li Tai still needs a close elder who is knowledgeable about the situation to constantly remind himself, so as not to act recklessly and make mistakes. The character he had originally anticipated to be his father Li Xiao, but he didn't expect Li Xiaojian to have followed the defeated army into Guangzhou. Although he Baixing is a newcomer, he has already given him a lot of guidance. However, the relationship between the two sides cannot be considered friendly. For he Baosheng, he is just the nephew of an old friend. If he were to cling to the other party for this, it would be unreasonable. As Huazhou city approached, Li Tai's heart became increasingly confused, and his conversation with He Baosheng gradually became somewhat absent-minded. He Baosheng seemed to have noticed the young man's worries. Apart from his friendship with Lu Shuhu, to be honest, he himself had a good impression of this young man, with much better speech, behavior, and demeanor than his peers. So much so that He Baosheng fantasized in his heart, would his sons who were left behind in Dongzhou also have this kind of charm? If my son is like this, with no attachment or livelihood, I also hope that there will be a kind-hearted elder who knows old friends and can take on their support. The thought flashed through his heart, and He Baosheng took a deep breath and looked at Li Tai, saying, "If Li Lang has nowhere to go after entering the city, I have a leisure garden in the west of the city." Before the words could be finished, a group of knights rushed towards the city gate of the state, and one of them shouted loudly, "Ah Pan, you have finally arrived. I have been guarding you at the gate for many days, and fortunately, we have not let you down. Ayatollah, we can gather in Kansai." End of this chapter.